Jaime Lannister sat astride his horse, the cold wind pulling at his hair, staring toward the distant line of jagged mountains that framed the northern horizon. The notion of the wall, unimaginably vast, older than memory, had once been just a rumor to him, a map's edge he never thought he would see. Now it stood as his final destination. He had no illusions left about his life, his legacy, or the family name that had once been his armor. The Golden Lion was tarnished, weighed down by debts of blood and betrayal. Long ago he had dreamed of honor, convinced he was the best swordsman alive, a knight admired by all. Yet he had grown into the Kingslayer. He had lost his right hand and with it most of the pride that had defined him. Now he had lost everything else, and so he traveled north to take the black and bury his past in the cold. His horse, a dark bay gelding, stamped its hooves on the frost-limbed ground and snorted clouds of steam. Behind Jaime trailed half a dozen men, a makeshift escort of wanderers he had hired in the Riverlands. They were grim, silent sorts, but loyal enough as long as he paid them. None of them asked questions. He suspected they half believed he was only going to the wall for some clandestine mission, perhaps at the behest of Cersei or another powerful figure. Jaime had offered no explanation. Let them imagine what they would. Soon he would stand at Castle Black and their service would be done. The cold prickled his skin even through layers of fur. The early winter sun rose feebly, casting weak light upon a land already preparing for the deep freeze. Jaime realized, with a twist of irony, that this was the route Tyrion had once taken, back when he had his own reasons for visiting the wall. Jaime might have teased him for it then. Now it felt like a pilgrimage. Each step took him farther from his old life. So be it. Better to be done with it quickly. They made camp that night in a bleak clearing surrounded by low pines. The ground was frozen solid, making it difficult to drive in tent pegs. The men gathered firewood, coaxing the flames to life. Jaime sat apart from them, warmed only by memory and regret. He thought of the day he left Cersei, turning his back on her as she stood, hollow-eyed and furious, in the ruin of King's Landing. Her hair had been dirty with soot, the taste of defeat sour in her mouth. She had called him a coward. He had ignored her. The break was final, irreparable. He remembered her voice echoing in the chamber, calling his name, but he had kept walking. Only later did the enormity of it sink in. He was free in a way he had never been before. Also alone. He closed his eyes, letting the cold air numb him as the flames crackled. He heard the men talk quietly, likely about him, Jaime Lannister, the famous knight gone to the Night's Watch. They probably thought he was a broken man running from the world. Perhaps they were right. He only knew that he was done with the games of thrones and queens. Whatever life remained in him would be spent in service of an oath that might actually matter. He found a measure of comfort in that. By the third day of travel, they reached the foothills that led to the northern plains. The wind cut sharper, carrying a knife's-edge chill. Villages became sparser, the road more desolate. They passed scattered farmsteads where the people regarded them with suspicion, peering from behind shutters. Jaime wondered if they recognized him. He doubted it. He wore thick furs and hid his golden hair beneath a hood. His missing sword hand was the only clue to his identity, and that might mean nothing to them. He took small solace in anonymity. As the sun dipped low, they stopped at an inn near a dilapidated outpost. Its walls were battered, painted with the dust of old wars. He paid for the men's lodging and found a corner table to take his supper. The stew was watery but hot, the ale bitter. He felt the innkeeper's gaze roam over him, likely noting the stump of his right arm or the expensive cloak that marked him a man of means. Two of the men who traveled with him sat nearby, passing idle talk about the road ahead. One asked Jaime how far to the wall now. Jaime shrugged. 2, maybe 3 days. Less if the weather holds. The man nodded. I heard the Black Brothers give you a chance to leave your old life behind. That true? It's the essence of the vow, Jaime answered. You forget who you were and you devote yourself to the watch. The man frowned. That's well enough, but do they not also say the watch is for thieves and bastards? Jaime's lips twitched, a half-smile. Knights too, or so I hear. The man looked away. Jaime returned to his stew. That was the end of the conversation. The inn's common room was sparse that night, a few travelers with hollow eyes trying to nurse drinks against the cold. Jaime wondered if any recognized him, or if he was merely another wraith passing through. Once he might have craved the attention, the admiration of being Jaime Lannister, but that part of him felt very distant now. When morning came, they set out again. The land rose gently, then fell away into a vast horizon. The north spread out before them, winter's breath visible on every bare branch. Jaime observed the changing landscape. The sky seemed bigger here, the wind unrelenting. He thought about the vow he would soon make. The King's Guard vow had once meant everything to him, but it had become tainted by love for Cersei and the memory of Aerys Targaryen's cruelties. This vow, though, might redeem him. At the very least, it might give him a purpose he could believe in, free of the Lannister name's weight. They skirted Mole's Town at midday, a scattering of hovels and a few hidden tunnels that Jaime knew were used by smugglers. The men seemed uneasy, but Jaime was anxious to continue. By late afternoon, the wall loomed in the distance, its blue-white surface almost surreal, a colossal barrier carved by ancient powers. Jaime had heard stories all his life, yet none captured the sheer scale of it. Even in the waning light, he could make out the watchtowers perched atop the ice. He reined in his horse, pausing with the wind battering his cloak. So this was the end of the world. He felt a curious mix of awe and dread. His escorts shifted restlessly. "We'll take you as far as Castle Black, sire," one of them said, tugging his hood lower. Jaime only nodded. They arrived before dusk, passing through the outer gate. Castle Black sprawled in the shadow of the wall. Wooden barracks, stone keeps, a scattering of smaller structures. Smoke rose from chimneys, and black-cloaked figures moved in the yard. Jaime dismounted, feeling his limbs ache with cold. The place smelled of stale cooking grease and unwashed wool, but also of discipline and quiet resolve. He handed the reins to one of his escort, then stepped forward to greet two sentries wearing the watch's black. "State your business," one of them said, glancing at Jaime's stump and then at the men behind him. Jaime inhaled. "I've come to take the black," he said. "My name is Jaime Lannister." The guard exchanged a look with his companion. "Lannister," the faintest flicker of recognition sparked in his eyes. "You're the one-handed knight?" "Yes," Jaime said simply. "I can still hold a sword in my left hand, if that's a concern." The guard grunted. "All right, we'll bring you to the Lord Commander. Your men can stable the horses, but they can't stay without swearing. Is that understood?" Jaime turned to his escort. "You've done your job. Take the horses and go if you wish. The gold is yours." He passed a small purse to one of them, who nodded in gratitude. He doubted they would linger here. There was no warmth to be found at the wall for travelers who did not intend to join the watch. The men bowed and departed. Jaime felt a pang of finality as he watched them go. He was alone. One of the sentries, a lantern-jawed brother with a small scar on his cheek, beckoned Jaime forward. "This way," he said. "The Lord Commander should be in his solar." They crossed the yard. Jaime felt the stares of black brothers, some wide-eyed, some openly hostile. He pretended not to notice. These men had reason to despise the Lannisters, given the wars and the rumors. But he was here now, ready to cast aside his old name and titles. Let them judge. He had made his choice. In a tower overlooking the yard, they climbed a narrow stair and reached a thick wooden door. The guard knocked. A voice inside bid them enter. The guard pushed it open, revealing a cramped chamber with a small brazier for warmth. Weapons, old swords, warhammers, lined the wall, along with a shield bearing the watch's emblem. Behind a rough-hewn table stood the Lord Commander, a middle-aged man with weathered features and shoulders that hinted at old strength. He looked up and his gaze settled on Jaime with a mixture of curiosity and caution. "Lord Commander Stoneglen," the guard said, "this is Jaime Lannister. He's come to join the watch." Jaime bowed, left hand on his sword belt. "My lord, I've traveled from the south to swear my life to the wall." Stoneglen studied him, brow furrowed. "It's not every day a famed knight, especially one known as the Kingslayer, decides to take the black. I've heard stories. Why would you come here of your own accord?" Jaime lifted his chin. "Because I have nowhere else to go. And because I swore to defend the realm once, albeit in a different capacity. Let me do so again. I ask for no special treatment. Put me to the tests any recruit must face." Stoneglen exchanged a glance with the guard, then gestured for Jaime to approach the table. A single candle flickered, casting shadows on the Lord Commander's scarred cheek. "We need men. That much is true. The war against the dead is over, but winter is coming soon, or so the maesters say. Every sword helps if it's loyal." He tapped his fingers against the tabletop. "You have a past that might make some men uneasy. But the Night's Watch is for outcasts and oathbreakers, so you'll fit right in." Jaime inclined his head. "Thank you." Stoneglen scratched at his stubble. We'll need you to say the words before the weirwood in the godwood. Then you'll be one of us and all your old sins and titles are to be set aside. That suits you. It does. Then we'll have the ceremony in the morning. For now, you can lodge in the old barracks. We're short on space, mind you. He eyed Jaime's stump. Your sword arm, how good is it with the left? Not as good as it was. But I've improved, Jaime said, forcing a neutral tone. Give me a blade and I'll prove my worth. Stoneglen nodded. See to it you do. You're dismissed. His gaze shifted to the guard. Find him a pallet in the east barracks. Make sure he has clothes suitable for the cold. Jaime wanted to feel relief, but all he sensed was a strange emptiness. This was it. No more House Lannister. No more illusions of knighthood in the halls of power. He was about to join the men in black, the watchers on the wall. He followed the guard back down the twisting stairs and out into the frigid yard. Darkness had settled, torches flickering in the gloom. Men with lean faces and hollow eyes moved about on errands. The guard led Jaime to a long wooden structure that smelled of old sweat and damp straw. Inside, rows of bunks lined the walls. Few men were present, most were likely at supper or still on duty. The guard gestured to an empty bed. That one, he said. The sheets are clean enough. Jaime dropped his pack on the bunk, glancing around. One or two crows looked over at him with half interest, but said nothing. Thank you, Jaime told the guard. The man shrugged and left him to it. Jaime sat on the narrow bunk, feeling the coarse blankets under his gloved hand. Tomorrow he would speak the words. Tonight he was in a place that reeked of loneliness. In a way, it reflected how he felt inside. He had severed himself from Cersei, from the last tatters of his old life. Maybe at long last he would find peace here. He had no appetite, so he drifted outside, letting the night air settle on his shoulders. Fat snowflakes spun lazily in the glow of torches. Men crossed the yard in small groups, black cloaks snapping in the breeze. From somewhere above on the wall itself, he heard a faint horn blast, perhaps a changing of the guard. The scale of it awed him even as gloom pressed in. He remembered Tyrion's wonder when he had first visited. Jaime felt it now. This was the boundary of the known world, and he was about to pledge himself to it. He lingered there in the cold until the ache in his stump grew too strong. Then he returned to the barracks, removed his boots, and tried to sleep. He drifted in and out of uneasy dreams, memories of the Red Keep, of Qyburn's experiments, of dragons shrieking in the sky. Cersei's face loomed, twisted in anger. She called him a coward, a traitor. He murmured in his sleep, struggling to banish her image. When he woke, hours later, the barracks were quiet save for the rhythmic snores of men who had found some measure of rest. Dawn light seeped through the cracks in the walls. That morning, he washed quickly in a basin of icy water, then made his way to the common hall, guided by the smell of breakfast. The building was large and drafty, filled with long tables. Brothers in black cloaks huddled over bowls of oats or cups of thin ale. Conversation was muted. Many of them looked like outlaws or peasants, men who had turned to the watch for a second chance. Jaime felt their stares but ignored them. He took a spot near the end of a bench, eating stale bread dipped in weak broth. The taste was bland, but he was hungry enough to appreciate it. As he finished, a lean man with a gaunt face slid onto the bench across from him. "You're the Kingslayer," the man said quietly, voice scratchy. "Didn't expect to see you among crows." Jaime let the nickname wash over him like a gust of wind he no longer felt. "I was. Now I'm just another recruit." The man studied him with dark eyes. "I fought in the war. Saw some of my friends die thanks to Lannister armies. Going to be hard swallowing that you're one of us." Jaime nodded. "I understand." After a moment, the man gave a half shrug. "We take what we can get. The wall doesn't care about old grudges. I'm Burke. Don't cause trouble and we'll get along." Jaime inclined his head. "Fine." Burke stood and left. Jaime exhaled. The undercurrent of tension was thick. He doubted it would vanish quickly. But as the Lord Commander had said, the Night's Watch was for outcasts. He had to take solace in that. Rising from the bench, he felt a tug of nerves. Today he would speak the words. He thought of Brienne, that tall, unyielding woman who had once called him out on every lie he'd lived. In some ways, she had catalyzed the change in him. Would she approve of this decision, or pity it? He shook the thought away and left for the Godwood. A handful of black brothers awaited him in the courtyard. One carried a torch, though it was daytime, to light the way through the dim path to the small Godwood of Castle Black. The sun was rising weakly over the top of the wall, and the air was bitter cold. The men led Jaime to a small gate, and beyond it a cluster of thin trees crowned with frost. The heart tree, a pale weirwood with a carved face, stood at the center, red leaves trembling in the breeze. The old gods watched silently as they had for centuries. Lord Commander Stoneglen was there, flanked by 2 officers. He beckoned Jaime forward. "Kneel before the heart tree," Stoneglen said simply. Jaime stepped onto the cold ground and lowered himself to 1 knee. He could feel the eyes of the old gods or the men behind him bearing witness. A hush settled. Stoneglen spoke in a low, solemn voice. "Jaime Lannister, do you freely offer your life to the Night's Watch?" Jaime swallowed. "I do." "Then speak the words and rise as a brother." Jaime took a breath, exhaling mist into the cold air. He recited, "Hear my words and bear witness to my vow. Night gathers, and now my watch begins. It shall not end until my death. I shall take no wife, hold no lands, father no children. I shall wear no crowns and win no glory. I shall live and die at my post. I am the sword in the darkness. I am the watcher on the walls. I am the shield that guards the realms of men. I pledge my life and honor to the Night's Watch for this night and all the nights to come." The words rang in the silent clearing, echoing against the ancient bark. Jaime felt a shiver unrelated to the cold. This vow was final. With it, he erased Jaime Lannister, the Golden Knight. He was now one of the Black brothers, nothing more, nothing less. Stoneglen placed a hand on Jaime's shoulder. "Rise, brother." Jaime stood. The Lord Commander offered a curt nod. "Welcome to the Night's Watch. From this day forth, you are no longer a Lannister or a knight of the King's Guard. You are a sworn brother of the Wall. We have no king but duty. Remember that." Jaime inclined his head, feeling a swirl of emotions he could not name. "I will," he said softly. They returned to the main yard where the gathered men awaited, some curious, some indifferent. Stoneglen addressed them. "He has said the words. Treat him as you would any brother, no better and no worse." He fixed Jaime with a level stare. "You'll start your duties today. I'll have you drilling with the yard master, then you'll join a patrol to the base of the wall." "Understood." Jaime nodded. "Yes, Lord Commander." "Good." Stoneglen dismissed him with a wave of the hand. The men dispersed, though a few lingered to size Jaime up. He brushed past them, determined not to shrink from their stares. He found the yard master near the armory, a grizzled man with a permanent scowl. "So you're the famous one-handed knight," the yard master said in greeting, thrusting a wooden practice sword toward Jaime's left hand. "Show me what you can do." Jaime took the wooden blade and faced the yard master in the center of a patch of beaten earth. Others gathered around to watch. Once he would have reveled in an audience. Now he just wanted to prove he wasn't useless. The yard master moved quickly, swinging his own wooden sword in measured arcs. Jaime parried with a slight tremor. He was still not fully accustomed to fighting left-handed. The yard master pressed him, forcing him to pivot, duck, and block. Jaime's body remembered the fundamentals, but the left side felt slower. The yard master finally disarmed him with a sharp twist, and Jaime's wooden sword flew into the dirt. A few watchers let out a mocking chuckle. Jaime caught his breath, cheeks burning. The yard master nodded grimly. "You're not worthless, but you'll need more training. Swordsmanship is more than technique. It's reflex. We'll work on your stance and footwork." Jaime retrieved the practice sword without complaint. Over the next hour, the yard master drilled him ruthlessly, correcting his posture, making him repeat maneuvers. Jaime's stump ached with phantom pain. Sweat stung his eyes despite the cold. He heard a few mutters of pity or contempt from the onlookers. He gritted his teeth, determined not to falter. If this was the price for redemption, so be it. By midday, his arms felt like lead. The yard master finally allowed a break. Jaime slumped against the armory wall, exhaling clouds of breath. He glanced up to see a rangy young man approach, wearing the black cloak loosely. "I've never seen someone handle a blade with just their offhand," the man said with a small note of admiration. "I'm Dale." "Jaime," he replied, then caught himself. "Just Jaime. No more Lannister name." Dale nodded. "Dead. You'll get better fast, I can tell. I started out as a stable hand who couldn't tell a spear's point from its butt. But the yard master's training sets you straight eventually." Jaime managed a faint smile. "I suppose it does." He wiped sweat from his brow. "What's next on the schedule?" "Patrol," Dale answered. "The Lord Commander wants you to join a group that checks the outer perimeter. Probably me and a few others. We'll head out soon. Then I'll meet you at the gate," Jaime said. Dale offered a friendly shrug and left. Jaime watched him go, surprised by the small kindness. Not every brother had to be an enemy, it seemed. Perhaps over time he could forge some sense of belonging. For now, he would do his duty. Before leaving, he returned the wooden sword and made his way to the barracks, stripping off sweat-drenched clothes to don fresh layers of wool and leather. Then he rejoined Dale and the patrol. They were 5 in all, mounted on sturdy horses. The wind had picked up, slicing through the yard. A black brother with a lined face named Gannon led the group. Gannon greeted Jaime with a curt nod, showing no overt hostility. "Let's ride," was all he said. They passed beneath the towering gate set in the wall, the tunnel of ice swallowing them. Jaime felt the cold intensify. The walls of the tunnel shimmered in torchlight and otherworldly hue. Soon they emerged on the northern side, the wilderness stretching before them. The land was mostly barren, a crust of snow covering rocky ground. Clumps of pine dotted the horizon. Gannon led them west along the base of the wall, scanning for signs of wildlings or other threats. After the White Walker War, the free folk had mostly scattered or joined settlements in the Gift, but stragglers could still pose problems. Jaime rode in silence, feeling the weight of so many ghosts. The hush of the wilderness was broken only by the crunch of hooves in the snow. Dale pointed out faint tracks, perhaps a stray fox, maybe a wolf. Once they spotted ravens circling overhead. Nothing else. The emptiness was strangely calming. Jaime reflected that, in King's Landing, life had been claustrophobic, stifled by politics and betrayals. Here, the horizon was open and the only foe was the cold. Yet it felt more honest. They halted at a small rise to eat a meager lunch, hard bread and salt beef. Gannon crouched, scanning the distance. "It's quiet. Maybe too quiet," he muttered. Dale shrugged. "Better quiet than trouble." Jaime said nothing. He looked north, imagining the countless leagues of ice and tundra leading to the lands of always winter. For a moment, his mind flickered back to Cersei. Would she even notice he was gone? A pang of loss shot through him, but he crushed it. That was behind him. He had sworn the vow. They continued riding until dusk threatened, then returned to Castle Black to report no sightings of note. Gannon gave Jaime a measured look as if reassessing him. "You did your job," he said simply. That was the only praise Jaime received, but he accepted it. He sensed that acceptance from these men would be slow. Fair enough. The days blurred into a routine. Jaime rose early, trained with the yard master, endured bruises and exhaustion. In the afternoons, he performed guard duty on the wall, scanning the horizon for signs of movement. At times, he joined short patrols. The monotony was broken by bitter cold and sudden squalls of snow. Life at the wall was harsh, but it was also strangely straightforward, survival and vigilance, tasks he could understand. No hidden webs of intrigue, no illusions of grandeur. He found that some men thawed toward him once they saw his willingness to labor as they did. One cold evening, he helped haul barrels of salt pork into the storeroom, an arduous task that left his muscles quivering. A brother named Tarek clapped him on the shoulder afterward. "Not what I expected of a lordling," he said with a toothy grin. Jaime only shrugged. He was no lordling anymore. Others, though, remained hostile. One stocky ranger named Brant glared openly whenever Jaime passed. Once in the common hall, Brant muttered loud enough for Jaime to hear, "Kingslayer should have lost the other hand, too." Jaime stiffened but did not respond. He was done shedding blood for petty slights. Over time, he learned that Brant's brother had died in a skirmish with Lannister forces in the Riverlands. That made sense enough. Jaime could not erase that man's grief. Occasionally, letters arrived from the south carried by ravens, but Jaime never inquired. He preferred to leave the realm's troubles behind. He caught fragments of rumors Daenerys Targaryen sat the Iron Throne, or perhaps Sansa Stark reigned in the north. Cersei was rarely mentioned. Jaime wondered if she lurked somewhere in exile or was gone entirely. His nights were haunted by dreams of her, but he always woke to the biting cold of the barracks. The watch offered no comfort for a restless mind. He simply pushed on. On a frozen morning, weeks after he arrived, Jaime was assigned to a ranging beyond the wall. Reports had trickled in of wildlings seen farther north. Lord Commander Stoneglen wanted a small party to investigate. Jaime volunteered. He left Castle Black with 6 brothers, including Gannon, Dale, and a quiet man called S. White H. who rarely spoke. They rode through the gate and into a realm of endless white, pines scraping the sky, the cold so severe it stung the lungs. For 2 days, they followed vague trails and half-faded footprints. They found a camp abandoned recently, its fire pit still warm. Signs suggested a small group traveling with a few children. Likely harmless, just trying to survive. Gannon debated whether to pursue them further, but decided to turn back. Winter was tightening its grip, making travel dangerous. Jaime felt a twinge of pity for those wildlings. Even with the gates open, They might fear the crows too much to ask for refuge. On the journey back, a sudden snowstorm swept in. They pressed on, cloaks whipped by the wind, vision reduced to swirling whiteness. Jaime rode near Dale, who kept peering over his shoulder as if expecting an attack. When dusk fell, they had to make camp under a rock outcropping, tethering the horses in a narrow ravine to shield them from the wind. The men huddled around a small fire, and Jaime took first watch, stepping a short distance from the flickering flames. He stared into the swirling snow, memories of old battles crowding his mind. He listened for wolves, but heard only the moan of the gale. At one point, he noticed a figure behind him. Eswith, the silent brother. Eswith wordlessly offered him a piece of dried meat. Jaime accepted it, nodding thanks. They stood side by side, scanning the dark. Jaime felt strangely comforted by the quiet solidarity. The wind howled, but for once he did not feel alone. Morning brought calmer weather, and they managed to return to Castle Black without incident. Jaime relayed their findings to Stoneglen, who nodded curtly. "Winter's coming," the commander murmured, glancing at the sky. "We'll see more refugees, I wager." He turned to Jaime. "You did well enough, I hear." Jaime dipped his head. "Thank you." Stoneglen regarded him, eyes narrowed. "What do you think of the wall so far?" Jaime paused. "It's simple," he admitted. "Harsh, but there's a certain clarity to it. You either keep watch or you fail. And no illusions to hide behind." Stoneglen grunted. "That's the wall's virtue. Good. Keep at it." He waved Jaime away as he often did. And so time wore on, measured by the daily grind, by the cold that grew fiercer with each passing week. Jaime's left-handed swordsmanship improved under the yardmaster's unrelenting drills. The yardmaster no longer pitted him. Instead, he corrected stance and footwork with the same barked orders he gave every brother. Jaime found himself parrying blows he would have missed a month earlier. He remained far from the swordsman he once was, but at least he could hold his own. In the evenings, he sometimes joined a group by the hearth in the common hall, listening as they told stories or complained about the weather. He rarely spoke, but he was there, part of their circle. That was more than he had expected. He wrote no letters to the south, sought no news. The vow had severed him from that world. A small part of him wondered if Tyrion still lived, but he did not let the thought linger. All of it lay behind the wall in the land of lost things. Then, late one afternoon, as he returned from a shift atop the wall, he found the courtyard in an uproar. Men were gathered near the gate, shouting. Jaime pushed through the throng to see wildlings being ushered inside. An old man with a tangled gray beard, a young woman clutching a baby, and 3 others. They looked half-frozen, eyes wide with fear. One black brother had his sword drawn, but Gannon gestured for him to lower it. Jaime approached. The old man saw him and muttered something in a guttural accent. "We mean no harm," Jaime said, raising his left hand in a calming gesture. "Why have you come?" The old man spat, voice quavering with cold. "Dead things in the snow. Corpses that walk." His words caused a stir among the brothers. He gestured northward, his face twisted with terror. "We fled." A ripple of alarm coursed through Jaime. The war with the White Walkers had ended years ago. The undead threat was supposed to be vanquished, but rumors occasionally flared like brush fires. Stoneglen appeared, grim-faced. He demanded the old man explain further. The wildling described seeing strange tracks, half-rotten corpses, maybe a handful, wandering aimlessly. They had stumbled onto one at dusk, a ragged figure with bones showing through torn flesh, eyes white as snow. Stoneglen listened with a deep scowl. Then he ordered that the wildlings be given food and warmth. "We can't send them out in this cold," he said, ignoring the protests of a few crows who distrusted free folk. "If there's any truth to their claim, we need to know." He turned to Jaime, Gannon, and several others. "We'll form a ranging party tomorrow. Check the area where they said they saw these creatures. If it's a false alarm, so be it. But we have to be certain." Jaime's heart pounded. The idea of whites still walking the north made his blood run cold, though he had never faced them himself. He nodded. "I'll go," he said. Gannon did the same. Stoneglen fixed them with a long look. "Very well," he said. "Prepare yourselves. Dawn departure." That evening, Castle Black buzzed with rumors. Some scoffed that it was just wildling tales. Others, older veterans, recalled the horrors of the long night. Jaime sat by the hearth, listening. One brother declared that if even a single white roamed the north, it could be a prelude to worse things. Jaime said little, but he remembered the story of the war, how the dead had nearly destroyed everything. If that threat had returned, it might make Lannister feuds and Targaryen claims meaningless. The next morning, a party of 8 rode out in a thin haze of light. Gannon led, Jaime beside him, then Dale, White and 4 others. The wildling old man, who gave his name as Tormund, accompanied them reluctantly to show the way. They traveled hard, snow swirling around them in a chill wind. After half a day's ride north, Tormund guided them toward a ravine scattered with stunted pines. "Saw it here," he muttered, pointing with a trembling finger. They dismounted, leading horses carefully over icy ground. The air was deathly still. Jaime felt tension coil in his stomach. They found footprints, dragged, half-decayed prints. Something had indeed passed through, far heavier and more erratic than a normal man's stride. One of the Black brothers cursed softly. Gannon crouched, running his glove across a smear of something dark and frozen. "Could be old blood," he muttered. Cautiously, they followed the trail deeper into the ravine. The silence was absolute, broken only by the crunch of snow underfoot. Tormund stayed close to Jaime, muttering about the dead. Then, abruptly, White raised a hand, halting them. His eyes were fixed on something up ahead, a shape lying in the snow, motionless. They moved closer, weapons drawn. It was a body, half-buried, clothed in tattered rags. The face was turned away. Gannon signaled Jaime to circle around. Jaime took a breath, sword ready in his left hand, and approached. The corpse was that of a man, or what remained of one, skin gray and torn, limbs stiff with ice. The eyes were open, clouded, and lifeless. A wave of nausea churned Jaime's gut. This was no ordinary corpse. He forced himself to exhale, leaning in to check for any signs of movement. Nothing. He glanced at Gannon, who met his gaze grimly. Then, to be certain, Gannon took his sword and drove it through the chest of the body. There was no reaction, just the crunch of bone under steel. Dead, truly dead. Relief filtered through Jaime, but it was short-lived. Tormund hissed, grabbing Jaime's sleeve, pointing further up the ravine. Another figure stood there, half hidden by a pine trunk. Jaime's heart lurched. Slowly, the figure stepped into view, a tall, gaunt shape in ragged clothes. Its flesh was pallid, patches of hair clung to a scalp with gray lumps. The eyes glowed with a faint icy sheen. A white, moving silently, fixating on them with unnatural hunger. A sharp intake of breath rippled through the crows. Gannon shouted, "Form a line," but the white let out a rasping hiss and came at them with surprising speed. Jaime readied his sword, adrenaline surging. The creature launched itself at the nearest man, who swung an axe. The blow cracked into the white's shoulder, but it didn't stop. Jaime rushed forward, slashing with his blade left-handed, severing the white's left forearm. The creature shrieked, stumbling. Another brother stabbed it through the abdomen. Still it flailed, snapping its rotten teeth. Gannon produced a dragon-glass dagger provided by the watch for just such an occasion. He drove it into the white's chest. A spasm racked the corpse and it collapsed, twitching. Dale, panting, glared at the fallen creature. "Gods be good," he whispered, voice shaking. Jaime's pulse pounded in his ears. He stared at the white's face, a contorted mask of death. So the rumors were true. He realized with a surge of dread that this might mean more were out there. He turned to White. "Check the area." White nodded. The men fanned out, warily searching the ravine. They found no more whites, but discovered signs that at least a few had moved through recently. Gannon stood over the fallen corpse, face grim. "We need to warn the Lord Commander. If there's one, there could be more." Jaime thought of the dead man they found in the snow, the half-buried one that truly was lifeless. Perhaps it had been a companion of this white. Could something be reanimating corpses in small numbers, or was a larger threat stirring? A chill that had nothing to do with the wind settled on him. "We ride back," he said. Gannon nodded agreement. They burned the destroyed white's remains with torch and oil, ensuring it would not rise again. Then they mounted up, Tormund shaking like a leaf. The journey south was tense, every stray shadow a potential threat. Nothing else appeared, however, and by dusk they returned to Castle Black. The gates opened to admit them, and Stoneglen came at once, reading the alarm on their faces. They told him everything. The commander's jaw tightened. "Whites," he said, spitting the word. "We'll send ravens to Winterfell, to Eastwatch, to anyone who'll listen. The realm can't ignore even a trickle of the dead." He paused, then fixed Jaime with a hard stare. "You did well out there, brother. For all your Lannister baggage, you stood your ground. You've proven you can fight." Jaime dipped his head, uncertain what to say. He felt only a grim sense of foreboding. The next days confirmed that fear. Other patrols returned with reports of scattered whites roaming beyond the wall as if pockets of necromantic energy still lingered. The rumors spread among the men, stoking old nightmares. Stoneglen ordered the gates fortified, the patrols increased. Jaime threw himself into the tasks, whether hauling supplies or sharpening dragonglass weapons. He recalled once being so certain that real threats lay only in the south in the Game of Thrones. Now he realized how small the game was compared to the horrors that could awaken in the far north. The night came early, black, and cold. Jaime was posted atop the wall for a shift, scanning the endless white expanse under moonlight. The wind sliced at him, stinging his cheeks. He thought of the vow, "I am the sword in the darkness." Suddenly, those words felt vital, no longer just recited. If the undead truly stirred again, the men of the Night's Watch would be all that stood between them and the rest of Westeros. That was a duty worth more than crowns. Near midnight, he descended the stairs into Castle Black's courtyard, stamping his boots to regain feeling. Brothers were alert, fires burning in braziers. The old man Tormix slept in a corner of the common hall along with the young woman and her baby. Jaime saw them once in a while, fear etched into their faces. They had nowhere else to go. The watch might have to open the gates to more wildlings seeking refuge if the sightings continued. Lord Commander Stoneglen sent ravens, but replies were slow or dismissive. Winterfell reported that no White Walkers had been seen, and the Southern Lords seemed unconcerned about a handful of whites. Jaime overheard Stoneglen muttering curses. "Fools learned nothing from the last war," he said to his officers. "One white can turn to 10, then to 100. One afternoon, Stoneglen summoned Jaime to his solar. The small brazier glowed, offering scant warmth. The commander's face was set in lines of worry. "I need a man I can trust to lead a scouting party far north," he said. "Find out how many whites roam out there. See if there's any sign of White Walkers themselves. Others will fear to venture that deep. But you and Gannon are capable. Dale Syth a few more. If you find something, send a raven if you can, or ride back with haste." Jaime stared at him, surprised. "You trust me that much?" Stoneglen waved a hand irritably. "I trust men who've shown loyalty in action. You have." He hesitated. "If you succeed, you might save lives, or you might die out there. But the realm needs to know what's coming." Jaime felt a surge of old adrenaline. For so long, he had served unworthy kings or queens. Now, ironically, the Night's Watch demanded the best of him. "We'll go," he said. "We'll do our duty." The commander nodded. "We'll give you the best gear we can spare, a week's supplies. The rest is up to you. Ride at dawn." Jaime left the solar with a heavy sense of purpose. In the yard, he gathered Gannon, Dale Syth, and 3 others. He explained the mission. They received the news with grim resolve. Supplies were packed on horses, dragonglass carefully stored. That night, Jaime lay awake in the barracks, gazing at the dark rafters. A year ago, he would never have imagined risking his life in the frozen wilderness to spy on undead. Yet it felt more honorable than anything he had done in the south. He closed his eyes, letting that truth steady him. At dawn, under a colorless sky, the small party rode forth. Stoneglen clasped Jaime's forearm at the gate. "Return," he said, "with news or with your lives. May the gods, new or old, go with you." Jaime only nodded. Then they were beyond the wall, the wind ripping at their cloaks, the vast northern wilderness beckoning. They rode for 2 days, pushing deeper into the lawn. Sea of ice. The cold was merciless. They camped in whatever scant shelter they could find, huddling around fires that barely kept the numbness at bay. Syth and Gannon kept a sharp watch, scanning for movement among the drifts. Tracks appeared sporadically, sometimes beast, sometimes man, sometimes disturbingly large footprints that defied easy explanation. Once Dale glimpsed a silhouette on a distant ridge, but it vanished when they investigated. On the 3rd day, they found a ravaged campsite. Tents torn, blood frozen in spatters. For bodies lay scattered, half-eaten or rotting. Gannon swore softly, nudging one with his boot. The face was contorted in agony. No sign of whites, but something horrible had happened. Jaime dismounted, bracing himself. "Any tracks?" he asked. One of the party, an experienced ranger, examined the snow. "Some partial prints. Hard to be sure. Could be an animal, could be men. They burned the bodies to prevent them from rising as whites. The stench of charred flesh clung to them as they pushed north." Jaime's mood grew darker. Why had they come so far? To confirm that death still lurked in these wastes? Yet that was precisely their duty. He thought of how Tyrion would approach this situation, probably with a sardonic joke about the wonders of the wall. He missed his brother, though he'd never admit it. Tyrion was out there somewhere, hopefully alive. Jaime shook off the thought. It was too raw. By twilight of the fourth day, the clouds had thickened, threatening snow. They spotted a faint glow in the distance. Gannon signaled for caution. Approaching slowly, they discovered a meager campfire in a shallow cave. Two wildlings crouched by the flames, swords drawn. A tense standoff ensued until Jaime raised his hands. "We're the Night's Watch," he said. "We mean no harm if you do not attack." The wildlings, a man and a woman, lowered their weapons warily. They looked half-starved, eyes wide with fear. After some coaxing, they spoke. They had fled a larger group of undead days ago, losing companions in the process. Another rumor of whites. The woman's voice shook as she described corpses that lurched through the snow, unstoppable unless burned. "We saw 5, maybe 6, but there could be more," she whispered. "The cold is bringing them back." Jaime gave them a bit of food. In return, the wildlings told him of a place farther north where they had seen more tracks. A sinking feeling took hold of Jaime. It seemed the dead were scattered but growing in number. They urged the wildlings to follow them south to the wall, but the pair refused, preferring to seek out free folk-kin. "We'd rather face the cold than your crows," the man muttered, spitting in the fire. Jaime did not argue. The next morning, an icy gale roared in from the north. Snow hammered them, cutting visibility to mere yards. Despite this, Gannon insisted they continue until midday, hoping to verify the wildlings' claim of more whites. Dale was near his limit, face pale with cold, but no one complained openly. They struggled forward, heads bowed against the wind. Then, through the whirling white, they heard a faint noise, like a moan, inhuman and distant. Everyone froze, hands going to their weapons. Slowly, they advanced. Shapes moved among the snowdrifts, indistinct and wavering. Jaime's heart thudded. He squinted, trying to make out what lurked ahead. A white lurched into view, a skeletal figure with ragged bits of flesh clinging to frozen bone, empty eye sockets. Behind it came another and another. At least 4 or 5, stumbling in a loose pack. They had not noticed the Watch's party yet, or perhaps the storm deafened them. Gannon motioned for silence, for the men to fall back. But one horse whickered, the sound carrying on the wind. The whites' heads snapped up in eerie unison. They emitted guttural hisses and rushed forward. "Form up," Gannon shouted. They dismounted, not wanting to be thrown if the horses panicked. Jaime drew his sword, though his left fingers were numb inside the glove. White H ready to dragonglass dagger. Dale fumbled to light a torch. The whites flung themselves through the snow, limbs jerking. One crashed into the nearest brother, knocking him down. Another snapped its jaws at Jaime. He ducked, slashing across its chest. It barely reacted, clawing at him with blackened fingertips. Jaime kicked it back, then drove his blade into its neck, severing the head. It flopped into the snow, mouth still gaping. Beside him, Dale thrust the lit torch at a white's face. The creature howled, staggering. Gannon lunged with his dragonglass dagger, ending it. The other whites pressed in, heedless of wounds. A brother cried out, pinned under a thrashing corpse. White H moved in like a shadow, stabbing with precision. Jaime turned to help the pinned man, hacking at the white's shoulders. The stench was overwhelming, a rot and cold. Finally, the white collapsed, twitching in the drift. Then it was over. 5 whites lay scattered, twitching remains. Dale stumbled to burn them with the torch, ensuring they would not rise again. One brother had a bad gash in his side, blood soaked his cloak. Jaime knelt, pressing a cloth against the wound. The man groaned. The storm still raged around them, and the horses stamped nervously. Gannon cursed under his breath. "We can't stay here. We need to get back to Castle Black. This is proof enough." No one argued. They retreated south as quickly as they could, half carrying the injured brother. The snowstorm battered them, but the adrenaline of the fight propelled them onward. Jaime felt dread settle like a stone in his gut. So many whites scattered through the north. A chilling possibility formed. If they continued to multiply, the realm could be threatened anew. Had no one learned from the last war? Their journey back was arduous, but after 2 more days of near-constant snow and sparse rest, they finally glimpsed the wall's silhouette. Relief coursed through Jaime at the sight of that colossal barrier. They rode through the gate, exhausted and half-frozen. Brothers hurried to help them, taking the wounded man to the maester. Jaime staggered into the courtyard, practically numb from cold. Stoneglen appeared, eyes grim. "You saw them." Gannon nodded, voice hoarse. "More than a few. We destroyed some. but the north is swarming with pockets of whites. Stoneglen cursed, glancing at Jaime. So it's real. Damn it. We'll send new ravens to the lords. Maybe they'll listen this time. We must bolster our defenses. Winter's coming fast, and with it, his voice trailed off. He gave a weary sigh. You've done your part, Jaime. Go rest. We'll need you soon enough. Jaime bowed his head, trudging to the barracks. The tension in the castle was palpable. Men whispered about the possibility of another full-blown invasion by the dead. Some clung to the hope that a few scattered whites did not mean the walkers had returned. But Jaime knew fear when he saw it, and the men were afraid. That night, as he lay on his bunk, exhaustion claimed him. He dreamt of old battles and new horrors. In his dream, he stood on the ramparts of the Red Keep, looking out at an army of the dead while Cersei whispered in his ear, telling him to burn them all. He jolted awake, sweat cold on his skin, heart racing. He realized he had no regrets about leaving her behind. His vow was here now, and if the dead truly marched again, he would face them, no matter what it cost. Over the following days, Stoneglen did all he could to fortify Castle Black. Patrols were increased, though men were cautious. The wildlings who arrived seeking shelter were granted it if they came peacefully. Old grudges dissolved in the face of potential doom. Jaime spent his hours drilling recruits, sharing what he knew of swordwork, even though he was hardly a master left-handed. But he had experience, and they needed every advantage. Slowly, the men of the Watch began treating him less like a Lannister and more like a brother. Even Brant, who had harbored resentment, spoke to him civilly. "Heard you fought whites out there," he said one evening, grudging respect in his tone. "We'll need men who aren't afraid." Jaime only nodded. He was afraid, but he would fight regardless. As the nights grew longer and colder, word trickled in from other parts of the Watch. Eastwatch by the Sea reported sightings of undead washing ashore, half-decayed corpses. The Shadow Tower found whites along the foothills. Now, finally, a raven from Winterfell arrived, penned by Lady Sansa herself, expressing alarm and promising to send soldiers. But it would take time, and no one knew how many undead might gather in the interim. Stoneglen gathered the brothers in the courtyard one evening to address them. Torches flickered, casting dancing shadows. "We are the shield that guards the realms of men," he reminded them. "Our duty is clear. We hold the wall. We warn the realm. If the threat grows, we may face a siege by the dead." Grim murmurs spread. "This castle endured the long night once," Stoneglen said. "We can endure again." Standing amid the ranks, Jaime felt the collective resolve, tempered by fear. This was not the glamorous heroism of tales. It was the raw desperation of those who had no choice. But Jaime felt alive in a way he had not since losing his hand. Here, he was not the Kingslayer or the Queen's lover. He was simply Jaime of the Night's Watch, sword in the darkness. That night, posted on the wall, he gazed out at the starlit tundra. The vow echoed in his mind, a steady drumbeat. In that moment, he realized how far he had traveled from the golden halls of his youth. The cold bit deeply, yet he stood firm. If the dead came, he would stand against them, a black cloak wrapped around a heart that still beat for honor. Perhaps this was redemption or the closest he would ever come. He clutched the hilt of his sword, the stump of his right arm aching with phantom tingles. Far below, the north stretched into darkness, as silent and secretive as the grave. Snow glinted under moonlight. Somewhere out there, cold hands moved, reanimated bodies dragged themselves forward. Jaime steeled himself. A Lannister always paid his debts, they said, but he had a different debt now, to the Watch, to the living. And he would pay it even if it claimed his life. With the wind howling around him, he took a measured breath and peered into the night. Let them come. Jaime Lannister, sworn brother of the Night's Watch, would be waiting. Jaime Lannister stood upon the wall, the wind howling around him, and tried not to think of what might be moving in that silent, frozen waste to the north. Snow drifted across the top of the rampart in thin sheets, borne on gusts sharp enough to steal a man's breath. Beneath him, Castle Black was a latticework of torchlight and watchfires. Brothers in black cloaks patrolled the yard, posted at gates, or trudged up and down the creaking stairs that led to the wall's summit. It had been days since the last ranging returned with word of wandering wights, and the sense of unease still hung over every face Jaime saw. He was no stranger to war, but this was different from Lannister armies and court intrigues. Here, the enemy was death itself, given slow and malevolent shape. He stepped away from the edge. The biting cold burned his cheeks, and his left hand felt cramped around the hilt of his sword. His stump, hidden beneath layers of wool and fur, throbbed in the cold. He tried to flex the phantom fingers, but it only made the sensation worse. Turning, he strode toward the lift that would take him back down to the courtyard. One of the watchmen on duty, a balding, grizzled man called Corin, nodded at him in passing, teeth chattering behind his scarf. Jaime returned the nod. No one wasted breath on chatter at this hour. The wind ripped words away and scattered them into nothing. Buildlings and any undead that might be trailing them. If you find a wight that can be subdued, or if you see a White Walker, do what you must. We need answers. Jaime swallowed the dryness in his throat. When? Tomorrow, at first light, Stoneglen said. I'll see to the provisions. And Jaime, he hesitated, eyes flicking to Jaime's stump. We have limited resources. You'll be on your own out there, aside from Ganon's men. I trust you to lead them if necessary. Jaime inclined his head. I understand. We'll do what must be done. Stoneglen clapped him on the shoulder, then strode away, already calling for parchment and quill to write to Lady Stark. Jaime stood there a moment, the torchlight playing across the snow. Another journey north, deeper into the cold and the unknown. It suited him more than waiting around, letting his mind churn with doubts. At least out there, danger was direct. He could face it with steel. He found Ganon in the common hall, hunched over a table with Dale and S. White H. The Northerners had taken seats at a different table, their voices low. Jaime approached, seating himself on the bench beside S. White H. Stoneglen wants us at Craster's Keep, he said without preamble. We leave tomorrow morning. Ganon grunted. I figured as much. The old man's not one to waste time. He looked Jaime in the eye. I suppose we'll gather the same group that went north before. Maybe an extra man or two. That land is cursed, you know. So they say, Dale muttered, swirling the dregs of ale in his cup. Craster was a foul man by all accounts. The place burned during the White Walker War, but some folks said they saw dark shapes haunting the ruins even after. That might just be superstition, or might not. Jaime glanced around at the hall. Better to see for ourselves than wonder. If there's a chance wildlings are using it as a camp, they might know more about these wights. S. Whiteach's mouth twitched in the faintest grimace. We'll go. They talked logistics until the fire burned low. Ganon would gather supplies, salted meats, hard biscuits, skins of water, a small store of dragoglass daggers. Jaime would check on the horses. Castle Black had lost many mounts over the years to cold and mishap, so they had to ration them carefully. After finalizing the details, Jaime retired to the barracks, though he did not sleep much. The wind clawed at the shutters and dreams of rotting hands visited him again. Morning came bleak and gray. Jaime dressed in layers of black wool and leather, draping a heavy fur cloak about his shoulders. He strapped on his sword belt, mindful of how his left hip carried the extra burden. The yard was a swirl of fresh snow, stinging the eyes. Ganon and S. White H were already there, checking bridles and saddlebags. Dale loaded a pack horse with pitch and torches. Two other brothers, Armand and Tor, joined them. Both had scuffled with whites once, and Stoneglen wanted men who wouldn't freeze with terror. Stoneglen himself appeared to watch them off. He offered them each a dragoglass dagger, tested to ensure it was sharp enough to puncture flesh and bone. Watch yourselves, he said quietly. If the dead are out there, they'll not wait for a polite invitation. He turned to Jaime, voice dropping lower. If you find anything we can use as proof, do it. Sansa Stark needs to see what we're facing, or her bannermen will dither. And if you must, bring me back a white's head, though I'd rather none of you lose your own in the process. Jaime managed a faint smile. Understood. With that, they rode out. The gate closed behind them, leaving the towering wall at their backs. The hush of the northern wilderness enveloped them, broken only by the sound of hooves crunching through drifts. Their breaths plumed white around them. Jaime took point alongside Ganon, eyes scanning the horizon. Nothing but snow, jagged stands of pine, and the occasional swirl of wind-blown ice. They made for the tracks that led westward, skirting the base of the Frost Fangs. The terrain was treacherous, riddled with hidden ravines and ice-slick slopes. More than once, a horse stumbled, nearly spilling its rider. At midday, they paused in the lee of a boulder to eat hard-bread and shiver in a semblance of respite. No one spoke much. They conserved energy against the punishing cold. By dusk, the wind rose, forcing them to make camp early in a shallow valley. White and Armand gathered deadwood while Dale tried to coax a fire to life with flint and steel. Jaime walked the perimeter, stamping footprints in the snow so he could see if anything crossed them during the night. The sky darkened to iron and they huddled by the struggling flames, passing a skin of weak ale. The talk turned inevitably to whites. "How many do you think roam out here?" Tur asked, voice hushed as though the darkness might hear him. "Dozens, maybe hundreds," Dale guessed. "Scattered in pockets. Not like the last invasion, but still enough to kill us all if we're careless." Jaime gazed into the embers, remembering the grim sights of their recent ranging. "They move slowly, but they don't tire, and they don't feel the cold. If there's even a handful near us, we might stumble right into them before we see it." White said nothing, eyes on the flickering coals. Gannon muttered a curse. "We'll stand double watch tonight." He assigned shifts, pairing each man with another. Jaime ended up with Dale for the first watch. The others wrapped themselves in cloaks, trying to grab some rest in the snow. The wind moaned over the ridgeline. Jaime sat with Dale near the meager fire, scanning the gloom. Dale rubbed his gloved hands together. "You ever think about what you left behind?" he asked softly. "Down in the south?" Jaime considered how to answer. The short reply was that he had left behind everything: family, name, illusions of grandeur. "Sometimes," he said, "but I can't live in that world anymore." Dale nodded. "I had a wife once, or near enough that we called each other husband and wife. War took her. Then a local lord decided my farm was prime land for his new stable. I ended up fleeing. The watch gave me an option that wasn't starving in the street." "I'm sorry," Jaime said, and found he meant it. "But at least here we have a purpose." Dale's eyes flicked up to the stars, barely visible through haze. "Aye, though it's a cold comfort." They fell silent. The hours passed slowly, measured by the crackling wood. When their shift ended, Jaime roused Tor and Armand to take over. Sleep came fitfully. He dozed against a rock, one hand near his sword. Now and then, the wind shaped itself into eerie voices that might have been the howls of the dead. Each time he jerked awake, heart pounding, but nothing emerged from the dark. At dawn, they resumed their journey. Snow crunched under hoof, and the sky glowed a lifeless gray. Syth, scouting a little ahead, found an old path that angled northwest, matching the map in Gannon's memory from previous journeys. Late in the day, they reached a small copse of gnarled trees. Within that shelter, they discovered footprints, boot marks, not old, crossing from north to south. Likely wildlings, or so Gannon surmised. Jaime felt a flicker of hope. Maybe that meant the free folk here could tell them more. Still, caution was in order. Wildlings might also attack first, talk later. They followed the prints until they faded into icy ground, losing the trail at a half-frozen creek. The second night was a repetition of the first, except colder, with the wind picking up ominously after midnight. The men cursed their luck. By the third day, they saw the first sign that they were near Craster's old lands. A scattering of ruined outbuildings, collapsed under time and neglect. Something had once stood there, a small barn or stable. Now it was just broken timbers and wind-blown snow. No footprints, no sign of recent activity. They pressed on. Evening drew near when they finally glimpsed what was left of Craster's keep. Beyond a line of blackened trees, a partial wall jutted from the snow, scorched beams protruding like ribs. The stench of old ash and decay lingered faintly, noticeable even through the cold. Jaime reined in his horse alongside the others. A hush fell over the group. The place looked forsaken, the shadows long, the sky bruised with approaching dusk. They dismounted carefully, scanning for movement. Gannon gestured to half of them to circle around the perimeter while Jaime led the rest in from the front. Smoke-stained rubble dominated what used to be a courtyard. A portion of a wooden fence still stood, but mostly the keep was rubble, the roof long gone. Snow covered half-burnt beams. The hush was unsettling. Jaime's heart thumped. Each breath was a cloud. A crow cawed overhead, startling them all. Dale pointed at a meager structure that might have been reassembled from old timbers. It looked like a makeshift shack leaning against the remnants of a wall. No smoke rose from it and no light flickered within. Jaime approached on foot, blade half-drawn. "Hello?" he called, voice echoing among the ruined timbers. No reply. He moved closer, stepping over debris. He noticed fresh footprints in the snow leading toward the shack. Someone had been here recently, though he couldn't tell if they were still around. He beckoned Dale to circle right while Armand circled left. Carefully, Jaime pushed open the shack's flimsy door. A single cramped space lay beyond, stinking of stale sweat and something fouler. A dirt floor, scattered straw. No occupant. There was a discarded blanket, a wooden stool, some gnawed bones in a corner. Possibly someone had wintered here or tried to. Jaime inched inside, stepping around the debris. The bones looked suspiciously large, maybe from a sheep or goat. A few tatters of cloth lay nearby. Everything smelled rotten and the oppressive sense of gloom bore down on him. He heard Gannon's voice call from outside. Jaime stepped back into the open, letting the frigid air wash away the reek. Gannon had returned from his circuit with S. White, H. and Tor. "We found a pit over there," Gannon said, pointing behind the ruins. "Looks like a refuse hole. There's evidence of butchering." His face twitched with distaste. "Hard to say if it's animal or not." Dale emerged from the far side of the courtyard, shaking his head. "No living souls here, from what I can see. But there's a half-buried corpse near the fence. It's missing a leg and an arm." Jaime felt a chill. "A white? Hard to tell." "It's frozen solid," Dale said. "No sign it's moving. Should we burn it anyway?" Gannon hesitated, then nodded. "Aye. Let's see it." They followed Dale to where the fence still stood. A shapeless mound of snow and ice lay against the timbers. With some effort, they brushed away the crusted snow, revealing the upper torso of a man clad in ragged furs, face bloated by cold. His left arm was severed at the shoulder, the wound blackened. The right leg ended abruptly at mid-thigh. Jaime crouched, ignoring the rank stench that wafted up. He pressed a gloved hand to the man's chest, hard, frozen, no movement. This was no animated corpse at the moment. Whether or not it had ever risen, he couldn't say. Possibly the man had died from wounds or exposure. They doused it with oil from a small flask, lit a torch, and touched flame to the battered flesh. Fire flared, crackling in the twilight. The heat and light cast dancing shadows on the blackened wreck of Craster's Keep. Jaime watched the flames consume the body, feeling no triumph, only a hollow sense that he was burning away someone's final remains. He wondered who the man had been and what had cut him to pieces. Night came swiftly. The temperature plummeted, forcing them to seek shelter in the least destroyed corner of the keep. The men cleared rubble, created a makeshift windbreak from broken planks, and built a small fire. Snow blew in through gaps in the charred walls. Jaime volunteered for the first watch. He paced the perimeter, ears straining for any sound beyond the mournful wind. He saw no sign of the rumored wildlings who might have rebuilt the keep. Possibly they had moved on or been killed. When his watch ended, he let Gannon take over. Jaime huddled by the fire, dozing. The place made him uneasy, as though ghosts still lurked in the corners. Twice he jerked awake, convinced he heard footsteps. The third time he actually did hear something, a scraping noise outside. The others heard it too. Dale shot upright, reaching for his sword. Jaime bolted to his feet, grabbing the torch. They moved cautiously toward the half-collapsed door. SYTH followed, crossbow in hand. Outside, the moonlight revealed swirling snow. First, Jaime saw nothing. Then he caught a flicker of movement near the half-fallen wall. It looked like a figure hunched and skulking. He tensed, beckoning the others forward. They fanned out. Jaime advanced a few steps, breath steaming. "Who goes there?" he called. A shape rose from behind a fallen beam. A man, tall and gaunt, with wild hair and sunken eyes. He had a knife in hand. His clothes were ragged, patched furs. "Stay back," he rasped, voice cracking. "Stay away from me." Jaime paused, raising the torch. "We're the Night's Watch. You alone." The man's gaze flicked about, feral. "Stay back," he repeated. "Saw your fire. Thought might be whites. Or crows. Doesn't matter. I don't trust you." Gannon stepped forward, hands open. "We don't want to fight. Do you live here? Live?" The man let out a bitter laugh. "I survive. That's all. Craster's Keep is mine now. His ghost can have it back when I'm dead." Jaime exchanged a look with the others. So someone did remain after all. "Are there more of you?" Jaime asked. The man coughed, shaking his head. They died, or ran, or turned. I lost count. Doesn't matter. Now it's just me. I won't let you or them take it. Easy, Jaime said, trying a calmer tone. We only came to see who was here. The White Walkers are gone, but some whites remain. Have you seen them? The man twitched. Whites. I've seen whites. More of them out there, wandering. Some nights I hear them moaning. You crows never did us any favors. But if you want them dead, or what's left of them, do as you like. He still clutched the knife, obviously frightened. We can share our fire, Gannon offered, though Jaime saw his wary glance. You'll freeze out here on your own. The man stared at them, blinking rapidly. At last, he nodded, wariness in every line of his body. Fine, but no tricks, or I'll gut you. He spat on the snow. Name's Oric. They led Oric to the meager fire. He stayed on the far side, knife never far from his hand. Up close, he was little more than skin and bone, his face etched by hunger and paranoia. Dale handed him a chunk of bread which he devoured without thanks. Jaime watched him carefully. The man smelled unwashed, his teeth rotting, but he was alive and might have knowledge about the area. What happened to the others who were here? Jaime asked softly. Oric stared into the flames. We tried to stick together after the war. A few free folk, some crow deserters, no matter. This place kept the wind off us. Then the dead came, 1 or 2 at first. We killed them or thought we did, but then more. And there was something else. Gannon leaned forward. Something else. Tall, Oric whispered, voice trembling. Pale as moonlight. A walker. I swear it. Could be I was seeing things, but I think it spoke. A voice like cracking ice. When it pointed its spear, the dead rose again. We fled. Some froze, some were caught. I ran back here eventually, hiding like a rat in the ruins. Now I just wait. A hush followed. Jaime met Gannon's eyes. A White Walker if Oric was telling the truth. So they weren't all destroyed in the last war. That changed everything. No one wanted to believe it, but the scattered whites made more sense if one or more others still lurked in the far north, reanimating corpses. Jaime's pulse quickened. Proof of a White Walker would certainly galvanize the realm, but capturing one, or even seeing one, could be suicide. White cleared his throat. Where did you see it? Oric pointed vaguely north. Near the old forest line, a day's journey from here. They moved mostly at night with the wind blowing. That's when you can hear them. If you have sense, you run south or hide. But I got nowhere else to go. We came here to find out what's happening, Jaime said. We might go after it. If we can locate it, or if it finds us. Oric snorted. If it finds you, you'll be dead. You crows think you're heroes? Maybe the Dragon Queen burned the Night King, but that doesn't mean all the others died with him. They might be biding their time. He shivered violently. Some nights I dream they're calling more corpses from the snow, building an army again. It sounded insane, but Jaime had already seen enough shards of truth to take the threat seriously. They questioned Oric for a while longer, gleaning a rough sense of direction. He claimed the whites tended to appear near the denser pine forests about a day's travel north where the ground dipped into old hollows. He had once seen them dragging fresh corpses behind them. The talk made the men uneasy, the firelight dancing on their grim faces. Eventually, Oric fell silent, hugging his knees. Jaime offered him a place to sleep near the group, with one of them always on watch. Oric only nodded, exhaustion etched across his features. The night wore on. Outside, the wind keened. Jaime took another shift in the small hours, standing guard near a gap in the ruined wall, scanning for shapes in the gloom. He wondered if Cersei could see him now. A one-handed man standing in a ruin, bracing for an impossible enemy. The memory of her face felt distant, like something glimpsed through a murky pane of glass. This was his reality now. When dawn arrived, bleak and pale, Oric was gone. Armand discovered footprints leading away from the keep. Oric must have slipped out in the dark. Possibly the notion of traveling with crows spooked him, or he had his own reasons. Jaime and the others were left to decide whether to chase after him, but Gannon reasoned they had more important tasks. He gave us a direction. That's enough, he said. We can't waste time chasing a half-mad wildling. No one disagreed. They scoured the ruins a bit more in the morning light, turning over burnt beams, checking for any sign of White Walker activity. Only emptiness and decay greeted them. They found old bones in the refuse pit, some animal, some possibly human. The gloom felt oppressive. By midday, they were ready to move on. The plan was to go north a short distance, see if they could spot any fresh signs, then circle back to Castle Black with whatever news they found. Jaime dreaded the possibility of meeting a walker face to face, but the vow bound him. They had to know the truth. Snow deepened as they pressed onward. Oryx's directions pointed them into a region of denser pine forest. The trees were tall, branches heavy with snow that drifted down in muffled cascades. The air felt stale, hushed. Hoofs sank knee-deep, forcing the horses to step slowly. Dale muttered about the difficulty of fleeing if whites attacked here, and no one disagreed. Jaime felt every nerve on edge. They glimpsed movement around midday, a flash of brown behind a trunk. Gannon signaled them to halt. White knocked his crossbow. They advanced cautiously, discovering an emaciated wildling woman crouched behind a snowbank. She wore ragged furs, staring at them with huge, fear-filled eyes. Behind her was a child no older than 6, equally gone. They looked ready to bolt, but they were too weak to run far. Jaime raised his hands to show he had no weapon drawn. "We won't hurt you," he said. "Are you alone?" The woman nodded silently, trembling. The child clung to her leg. Jaime offered them a small piece of dried meat from his saddlebag. The woman snatched it and crammed it into the child's mouth, tears glistening on her cheeks. Gannon approached, though carefully. "Do you know of the dead that walk?" he asked. The woman shuddered. "They're near. Killed my kin. We ran. I think they might be following us. Or maybe they moved on. I don't know." Jaime exchanged a grim look with Gannon. "We can't leave them here," he murmured. Gannon nodded. "We'll bring them to Castle Black if we can. They'll die otherwise." They coaxed the woman and child into riding double with Tor. The child was too weak to protest. Then they continued north, though Jaime questioned if that was wise with 2 frightened refugees in tow. They soon found more tracks, some half-buried by drifting snow. White bent to examine them. Boot marks and something else. "See these scrapes? Could be from dragging a body." He pointed to a faint trail that curved among the trees. The woman watched from atop Tor's horse, face pinched. They followed the trail as quietly as they could. The pines closed in overhead branches, whispering. The hush felt suffocating. At times they heard distant creaks or cracks, ice splitting or boughs weighed down by snow. Then, at the crest of a small rise, they spotted a clearing below. The tracks led there. Gannon motioned for them to dismount and proceed on foot, leaving the horses behind a screen of trees with Armand to guard them. Jaime's breath quickened. He could feel the tension radiating from the others. They crept closer. In the clearing, half hidden by a ring of pines, stood 4 or 5 shapes. They moved awkwardly, stooped over something. Jaime's pulse hammered. As the group edged in, they saw it clearly, whites hunched around a fresh corpse. The dead man's clothing was spattered with blood that had frozen in black patches. The whites tore at the body with their hands and teeth, a grisly feast. Dale swallowed hard. White's jaw tightened. Gannon clenched his drag-a-glass dagger. The woman let out a tiny whimper, choking it back immediately. Jaime forced himself to steady his breathing. They had destroyed whites before, but this was different, seeing them feeding like animals. Rancid stench hung in the air, though the cold dulled some of it. "There's 5, Jaime whispered. "We can take them if we're careful." Gannon nodded. "We circle around, split into 2 groups. Hit them from both sides." He glanced at the woman and child. "Keep them back. Dale, watch over them. If more show up, signal." Jaime, Gannon, White and Tor crept in a half-circle around the clearing. The whites were so preoccupied with their meal they scarcely noticed until it was too late. Gannon launched the assault with a spear thrust into the nearest creature's spine. It lurched, shrieking in that rattling moan. Jaime rushed another, swinging his sword left-handed. He severed part of its shoulder, but the white still turned, snapping at him. White drove a dragon-glass dagger into its side. The creature contorted, then collapsed in stiff convulsions. Tor bashed a white's head with a mace, spraying frozen gore. Another white lunged, nails raking Tor's arm. He cried out. Jaime pivoted, hacking the white's legs out from under it, then shoved his torch into its face. The stench of burning flesh made him gag. The white spasmed. Gannon finished it with the spear. It ended quickly. The whites lay twitching in the bloody snow. One still moved, jaws gnashing, so White pinned it down and shoved Dragaglass into its skull. Silence fell, broken only by the panting of men. The corpse they had been feeding on was beyond saving, half eviscerated. Jaime felt sick, but forced the emotion down. They had their proof of the undead if only they could bring it back. But every white was destroyed in the struggle, burned or stabbed with dragonglass, which made them go limp. Gathering a writhing white was nearly impossible. Jaime gazed around at the ruin. The air stank of death, and the child hidden behind Dale's bulk was sobbing softly. He could hardly blame the boy. "Tor, how bad is your arm?" Jaime asked. Tor winced, pulling back his sleeve. For deep scratches ran along his forearm, but the white's nails had not lingered. "We'll clean it and bandage it," Jaime said. "It shouldn't be lethal, but we can't be sure about infections." "At least they didn't bite you." Gannon exhaled. "No sign of a White Walker, though. Just whites. Still, we saw them. We should get back to the wall." Jaime considered. "We came hoping to find something we could bring as proof," he said grimly. "Dead whites are just corpses unless we haul one back intact. But we've dismembered these." He looked at the severed arms and heads scattered in the snow. Sometimes whites' body parts twitched after being separated, though these seemed still enough now. Even then, it might be foolish. The moment they thaw behind the wall, they might revive. But Stoneglen wants proof. White H looked uneasy. "We could take a head that's not fully destroyed, preserve it in the cold. But the risk? If it reanimates inside Castle Black, that's an invitation to disaster." Gannon sighed. "Let's see if any part of them is still moving." Carefully, they checked each white. Most had been too damaged, limbs severed, torsos shattered. One head, blackened from torch flame, still had a jaw that twitched faintly, a ghastly sight. Jaime felt his stomach knot. But that might be what they needed. The cold would keep it from rotting. Maybe that horrifying thing would remain inert if it was not near any White Walkers. Or perhaps it would snap back to life. Everything about whites was uncertain. They used a length of rope to secure the charred head inside a burlap sack, careful to keep it from moving. Dale looked pale as he helped tie the final knot. "7 hells," he muttered, carrying a white's head around. "We must be mad." Jaime caught the child staring wide-eyed, face streaked with tears. The mother clutched him protectively, eyes brimming with fear. Jaime had no words of comfort. This was their life now, forging proof of an undead threat. He turned away from the grisly scene, focusing on the practical matter of returning. "We should burn the rest of these whites," he said, gesturing at the remains. They used precious oil to set them aflame, black smoke rising among the trees. The stench made the child retch, and the mother covered his face with her ragged scarf. The day's light was already waning, the sun sliding behind the pines. "We should make haste," Gannon said. "We don't want to be caught by nightfall here." None argued. They hurried back to where Armand waited with the horses. The woman and child clung to Tor's mount once more, though Tor's arm had begun to stiffen from the scratches. Jaime had him switch to an easier horse so he wouldn't jostle the wound. Then they rode south, retracing their path. On the way, the trees loomed overhead like dark sentinels. They heard faint howling, wolves, or worse, but nothing materialized. A hush fell on them, broken only by the crunch of hooves. They traveled into the night, the moonlight illuminating the snow. The child dozed in the saddle. Tor gritted his teeth against the pain in his arm. Gannon and Jaime took turns riding at the rear, keeping watch for any pursuers. No sign of whites or White Walkers. Perhaps they had scattered. Or perhaps they prowled another corner of the wilderness. The following day was a grind. The temperature dipped further, a biting wind howling across the open stretches. The sack with the white's head swung from Jaime's saddle like a cursed trophy. Now and then he thought he felt it shift, likely his imagination, but he avoided opening it to find out. If anything, that would keep the child from seeing horrors better left unseen. By midday, Tor was feverish. The scratches had grown puffy, an ugly red hue. Jaime felt alarm coil in his chest. He had no idea if white scratches spread some infection or if it was simple rot. In the old tales, white wounds could fester unnaturally. But there was no choice except to hurry for Castle Black. They paused only long enough to boil snow for water and clean the wounds as best they could. Tor trembled but insisted he could ride. At dusk, they found the shelter of a small ravine with a trickle of running water. Gannon declared they'd camp there, though no one wanted to linger. They needed rest, and Tor's horse was near collapsing. White and Dale gathered wood while Jaime sat with Tor, pressing a damp cloth to the man's forehead. The mother and child crouched by the fire, wide-eyed. Jaime realized he never learned their names. Perhaps it didn't matter out here. Tor's breathing quickened as night fell. He muttered in delirium, complaining of freezing, then burning. Jaime looked to Gannon with concern. "We need a maester," Jaime said quietly. "This is beyond me. If he worsens, we'll be at the wall in another day if weather holds," Gannon said, though his tone was grim. "We push hard tomorrow." Night pressed down, cold and merciless. Jaime dozed fitfully. He dreamed of the head in the sack, its eyes opening, pale and full of hatred, calling out to something in the dark. He jolted awake covered in sweat. The reality was only slightly better. The wind had died, leaving an eerie silence. In that hush, Tor's rasping breath was too loud. Jaime checked him. His face glistened with fever sweat. The scratches on his arm were an angry purple, veins standing out. Jaime feared the worst. They left at first light, forcing a grueling pace. Tor, half-conscious, had to be lashed to his saddle so he wouldn't fall. The woman and child shared a horse with Dale. The land sloped downward as they neared the region south of Craster's Keep. The air felt slightly warmer, or perhaps they were simply desperate. Each passing hour was a test of will. Finally, near dusk, they crested a ridge and spotted the wall in the far distance, a jagged, pale line dividing the horizon. Tor was barely lucid. Jaime rode beside him, keeping him upright. The man groaned whenever his horse stumbled. By some mercy, they reached the gates well after dark, torches gleaming in the tunnel. Brothers rushed out to assist them. Stoneglen was there, worry etched on his face as he helped them dismount. Tor was carried inside, the mother and child huddled near the warmth of the gatehouse. What happened? Stoneglen asked urgently, eyes flicking to the bundle tied to Jaime's saddle. Whites, Jaime said, voice hoarse. We found 5, destroyed them. Tor was scratched. He's in bad shape. Take him to Maester Herod, Stoneglen ordered the men. You come with me. By the gods, is that a white's? Jaime nodded, untying the rope with shaky fingers. Part of a white, he confirmed. We thought it might serve as proof for the lords. Stoneglen's expression was grim but approving. We'll keep it cold and secure. If it's still active or can be reanimated, this might be the evidence we need to force the north and the south if the ravens reach them to realize the threat is real. He exhaled. Well done, though it's a horrifying trophy. Jaime was too exhausted to feel anything but relief that they had made it back alive. Gannon and the others drifted inside the courtyard, leaning on each other. Brothers crowded around, curiosity and apprehension thick in the air. The mother and child shrank from the attention, but Stoneglen assured them they'd be given shelter and food. In time, if the woman agreed, they could be sent further south or remain in the gift. They seemed too terrified to question anything. The next hour passed in a blur. Stoneglen had the white's head placed in a locked crate in a cold storeroom guarded by 2 men. No one wanted to risk it somehow reviving and attacking. Meanwhile, Maester Herod examined Tor. Word spread fast that the man had a raging fever and infected wounds. Jaime paced in the yard, ignoring the ache in his stump, waiting for news. Dale and White hovered nearby. Gannon, likewise, milled about restless. At last, Maester Herod emerged, rubbing his eyes. I've done what I can, clean the wounds, used poultices. The fever is strong, but he might fight it off if it's just normal infection. White scratches are not always fatal. We can only wait and see. His tone held no guarantees. Stoneglen joined them, face grave. I've sent a raven to Winterfell, telling them we have living proof of whites and urging Lady Sansa to act. Also, we'll reach out to Eastwatch, the Shadow Tower, anywhere that might muster men if the threat grows. In the meantime, we keep vigilant. This is bigger than we feared. Jaime thought of Oric's claim that a white walker roamed the forests. He told Stoneglen everything, voice lowered. The commander listened with a tight jaw. Another walker, he muttered. We prayed they were gone forever. If even one remains, he rubbed his brow. We can't fight that with so few men. Not on our own. Perhaps if the North unites again. But last time, it took dragons and half the realm. He thanked Jaime for the information, then dismissed him to rest. Jaime slipped away to the barracks, though sleep did not come easily. Tor's plight gnawed at him, along with the memory of those whites feasting. He had never felt so powerless. Even in war, men had lines they wouldn't cross. But the dead had no lines, no reason, only a hunger for the living. Eventually, he managed a fitful doze, haunted by images of a pale, icy figure commanding corpses from the dark. Morning brought no relief. Tor's fever had worsened, and he raved incoherently. Maester Herod bled him and applied more poultices. Jaime visited once, feeling hollow as he watched the man thrash on his cot. Others whispered that white wounds sometimes cursed a man to die and rise again. Jaime forced himself to push away that notion. The Watch had seen enough unnatural things to fear every rumor, but it was not certain. Gannon paced like a caged lion outside the infirmary, occasionally running a hand through his hair. Meanwhile, the mother and child had been given cots in a warm corner near the kitchens. They looked overwhelmed and terrified, but safe for now. Stoneglen asked them some questions, gleaning a general sense of how many wildlings might still roam the area. The woman said little, but confirmed that rumors of a white walker had spread among the free folk, driving them to flee. Castle Black braced for the possibility of more refugees. Late that afternoon, a horn blast echoed from the gate, a single note. Arrival. Jaime, along with several others, hastened to see who it might be. To his mild surprise, they found the northerner Branson again, accompanied by 2 more Stark men. Branson wore a grim expression as he handed over a letter from Winterfell. Stoneglen read it in stony silence. Then, without speaking, he beckoned Jaime to follow him to the privacy of his solar. Once inside, the commander set the letter on the table. Lady Sansa acknowledges our proof. She is sending a small group of knights and archers to witness the Whites head themselves. If they confirm it, she intends to muster as many bannermen as possible. But she warns that travel is slow. It may be weeks before any sizable force can gather. She also says the southern lords are fractious, some remain loyal to King's Landing, others to House Stark. The realm is splintered after so much war. Jaime nodded, reading the letter himself. The words were polite but urgent. Sansa wrote of wanting to see the living evidence of the threat in hopes it would compel the rest of the north. She would also dispatch ravens to the Vale to possible allies. But the process would not be quick. If the White Walker is truly out there, Stoneglen said, the threat could grow faster than we can react. The Whites we're finding might only be the beginning. Winter is deepening, giving them an advantage. Jaime's thoughts turned to the old lore. White Walkers were strongest in the cold, so the legend said, and could raise Whites from even century-old graves. He thought of the rumor that all the Walkers had been destroyed when the Night King fell, but evidently 1 or more had survived. We'll need Dragonglass and fire. Perhaps Valyrian steel if any remains in the north. Stoneglen let out a short, humorless laugh. Valyrian steel is rare enough, and most families that have it guard it jealously. You recall that your father's sword, Ice, was reforged into 2 Lannister blades, one was lost, one given away. He caught himself. Sorry. Old news, but relevant. The point is, we can't rely on forging new Valyrian steel. We have some dragonglass from Dragonstone's old supply, but not in huge quantity. Maybe Daenerys would send more if she believed. But we've had no answer from King's Landing. Jaime suppressed a bitter smile. She won't be eager to trust a Lannister's word. And I doubt she sees the threat the same way, not so far from the northern snows. Stoneglen rubbed his temples. We'll do what we can. At least Lady Stark is listening. We'll keep that White's head safe until she arrives, so her men can witness it. In the meantime, we watch for more. If we can discover the White Walker's location, maybe we can strike first. Or at least warn others. Jaime agreed, though the idea of facing a Walker without heavy reinforcements made his stomach knot. Once, the realm had faced an entire army of the dead. That had required dragons, allied houses, and desperate measures. Now, the realm was too divided to unite quickly. If the Walker built up enough Whites, they might have a smaller but lethal force that could slip past the wall or break through a weak point. Jaime tried not to imagine it. Stoneglen tapped the table. For now, rest. You've done enough for one day. I'll have Gannon organize new patrols, but not too far from the wall. We can't risk losing more men until Lady Stark's watchers arrive. He paused. How's Tor? Jaime's throat tightened. Not good. Herod's trying his best, but the infection is fierce. Stoneglen's jaw clenched. I'll pray he pulls through. Go see if you can help them. And if it goes wrong and he doesn't stay dead. Jaime nodded grimly. I understand. He remembered the grisly story of how some men in the Night's Watch had to burn a fallen brother who'd reanimated. He prayed it wouldn't come to that. He left the solar, heading to the infirmary. A few men loitered outside, faces drawn. Inside, Tor lay delirious, his eyes half open, sweat shining on his brow. Maester Herod was brewing some concoction that smelled of bitter herbs. He looked up when Jaime entered. I've managed to reduce the fever a little, but it's still dangerous. I'm doing all I can. Jaime nodded, stepping closer to Tor. The man's lips moved in silent pleas. Jaime caught fragments, talk of his old home, a sister in the Riverlands. He tried to hush Tor gently. The infected arm looked ghastly, bruises creeping along the veins. Jaime felt helpless. He tried to wash the wound again, ignoring the stench. Herod applied fresh ointment. The hours slipped by. Night fell. A pale moonlight filtered through the high window. Jaime kept vigil with Gannon. White H dropped in briefly, then resumed his duties. They were all exhausted. Near midnight, Tor's breathing suddenly hitched. He spasmed, crying out. Jaime pressed a hand to his shoulder. Tor, be still, he murmured. The man's eyes rolled back, and then he stopped breathing entirely. Gannon's face was grim. Maester Herod leaned over, checking for a pulse. He's gone, he said quietly, voice thick with regret. Jaime closed his eyes, grief welling up. Tor had fought bravely, survived the White attack, only to be taken by infection. The watchers on the walls lost another brother. Gannon exhaled unsteadily. We should burn him, he said, voice trembling. before he can rise. Maester Herod nodded. That's the safest course. But let me watch him a short while to be certain. Sometimes the body. A sudden rasping breath escaped Tor's lips, impossibly. Jaime recoiled, eyes widening. Tor's eyes snapped open, blank and unseeing. With a guttural moan, he convulsed, limbs flailing. Maester Herod staggered back in horror. Gannon shouted, "Gods!" Jaime grabbed for his sword. Tor's corpse lurched upright, mouth gaping. It was as if invisible strings pulled him. He lunged clumsily off the cot, reaching for Maester Herod with stiff, dead fingers. Herod scrambled away with a yelp. Gannon fumbled for his drag-a-glass dagger, but Jaime was closer. He drew his sword left-handed and slashed across Tor's chest. The blow staggered him, but the reanimated corpse kept coming. Its nails raked at Jaime's cloak, tearing the fabric. Jaime kicked it back, heart-pounding. Gannon seized the moment, plunging his dagger into Tor's side. The undead brother shuddered, letting out a wretched hiss. Even so, he did not collapse fully. Jaime gritted his teeth and swung again, taking off part of the jaw. Still it flailed. The infection or white magic had claimed him thoroughly. Footsteps thundered from outside. Several black brothers rushed in, alarmed by the noise. Jaime shouted for them to be careful. Gannon wrestled with Tor's corpse, grappling an arm while Jaime thrust Dragaglass directly into the chest. With a final spasm, the reanimated body collapsed onto the cot, twitching once more before going limp. Silence fell, save for the ragged breathing of the men. Herod stared, trembling. "Seven, save us," he whispered. He rose so fast. Jaime's face felt numb. They had just killed a brother's wight. If they had hesitated, it might have spread chaos throughout Castle Black. He wiped sweat from his brow, ignoring the chills that ran up his spine. Gannon's hand shook as he pulled the dagger free. The others stood by, expressions ranging from shock to sorrow. "Burn him," Jaime said softly. No time to wait. Men hesitated. This was a brother, after all, but then they complied. Tor was carried out on a makeshift bier to the yard, where they hastily built a pyre. The sickly smell of burning flesh soon permeated the frigid air. Jaime watched, jaw clenched, as black smoke rose to the pale moon. This was the new reality. Even a scratch might turn a man into an enemy. It was nearly dawn by the time Jaime collapsed onto his bunk in the barracks, weighed down by exhaustion and grim thoughts. He dozed for an hour, maybe two, until commotion outside roused him again. Rising with a groan, he threw on his cloak and went out to see men gathered near the gate once more. This time it was a group of half a dozen northern soldiers, Lady Sansa Stark's advance party. They had come sooner than expected, seeking the rumored White's remains. Some bore the sigils of smaller houses that bent the knee to the Starks. They looked uneasy as they surveyed the blackened rubble in the yard where Tor had been burned. Stoneglen greeted them, voice formal. Jaime stood a short distance away, observing. The visitors introduced themselves, the ranking officer a tall man named Ser Alistair. He explained that Lady Stark was sending more men behind them, but these half-dozen were scouts and observers, tasked with confirming the truth about the undead. Stoneglen nodded, grim-faced, and led them to the storeroom where the White's head was kept. Jaime followed, curious and apprehensive. Inside, they found the locked crate in a chill corner. Two black brothers stood guard, uncertain expressions on their faces. Stoneglen gestured for them to open it carefully. A wave of foul odor rolled out the moment the lid was pried up. Jaime braced himself. The sack lay within. One guard used a metal hook to pull it out, placing it on the floor. Gingerly, he loosened the rope at the top. The northern soldiers gathered around, some with swords half-drawn. Cautiously, Stoneglen used the hook to lift the burlap. The charred White's head rolled into view, a ruin of scorched flesh and bone. Its lips had been partially burned away, teeth grinning in a permanent snarl. The eyes seemed blackened, but as the torchlight fell on it, one eye twitched open, a flicker of pale movement, or perhaps just the final spasm of necromancy. Ser Alistair cursed, stepping back. Another soldier made a sign of the seven. Even the black brothers muttered in disquiet. "That's enough," Stoneglen said, covering it again. "We keep it locked up. My men found it feeding on a corpse beyond the wall. It's no trick. We also lost a brother to white infection. He rose in our infirmary last night." Ser Alistair's face was pale. "I believe you," he said softly. "Gods have mercy. We must warn Lady Stark. She'll muster the bannermen faster if we return with this proof. Would you allow us to transport the head to Winterfell for direct presentation?" Stoneglen hesitated, glancing at Jaime. "If we do, we lose our own leverage here. If more Whites appear, we might need that head to show others. But the realm must see it." He sighed, pinching the bridge of his nose. "All right, Ser Alistair. You'll have it. But handle it carefully in cold conditions. If it stirs, burn it. No sense letting it kill you." Ser Alistair dipped his head. "We will be cautious. We've brought a stout chest lined with ice to keep it frozen on the journey. Lady Stark will want to see it for herself." They arranged the transfer. The northern soldiers prepared a sealed, iron-bound chest, piling in blocks of ice, then carefully slid the head inside with the same metal hook. They hammered it shut, tested the locks, and said hurried prayers. Jaime watched the entire process, tension coiled in his gut. Part of him hated letting that monstrous thing leave the Watch's control, but it was better that the North see the truth. If the rumor of a living White Walker was real, time was short. Once finished, Ser Alistair and his men needed rest before returning. Stoneglen offered them the hospitality of Castle Black. They accepted, though they seemed eager to depart as soon as possible. By evening, ravens flew out again, bearing urgent missives from Stoneglen to other strongholds, repeating the dire warning. Jaime spent the rest of the day helping with chores, chopping firewood, repairing a section of the gate. Physical labor kept his mind from dwelling on Tor's last moments. He spotted the mother and child from earlier. They were clothed in slightly better garments provided by the Watch, and the boy clung to a wooden toy a brother must have whittled for him. Jaime felt an odd pang of gratitude that they had been saved from the Whites. A small victory in a land of terror. The mother caught Jaime's eye and gave him a tentative nod, which he returned. That night, the Stark soldiers shared the common hall with the Black brothers. Conversation was subdued, overshadowed by the grim proof locked in an iron chest. Over bowls of stew, Ser Alistair told Jaime and Gannon that Sansa Stark was determined to gather an army if what she saw matched the rumors. "She doesn't want a second long night," he said, stirring his spoon anxiously. "But the northern houses are battered from prior wars. We need the Vale, the Riverlands, maybe even King's Landing. And the Queen on the Iron Throne is no friend of House Stark." Jaime looked away. Once, his family had been bitter enemies with House Stark. Now, it seemed the lines had blurred in the face of a more ancient foe. "If the dead come in force, they won't care about banners," he said. "All that matters is we stand together. Last time, from what I heard, it was nearly the realm's end." Ser Alistair frowned. "I served in the tail end of that war when the Walkers threatened Winterfell. I was a squire then, but I saw enough to know we can't face them alone. If any remain, we'll do everything we can." He paused, meeting Jaime's gaze. "I never thought I'd say this to a Lannister, but we're on the same side now." Jaime gave a small nod. "We are." He supposed there was one fragment of redemption bridging an old hatred for a cause that mattered. He finished his stew and excused himself. The memory of Tor's reanimated corpse still haunted him. He found a corner near the hearth and tried to clear his thoughts. The logs hissed as flames consumed them, bright against the gloom. He wondered where Tyrion was, if he still lived, or if Daenerys Targaryen had overshadowed him at court. The South felt like another universe. In the morning, Ser Alistair's party departed, carrying the sealed chest with the White's head. Stoneglen wished them speed, urging them to march straight to Winterfell. One brother from the Watch, White, accompanied them to provide an eyewitness account. Jaime saw them off at the gate, exchanging a few parting words with White. "Tell Lady Stark everything, and keep an eye on that head," Jaime said quietly, gripping White's forearm. The man nodded, face set in determination. When they were gone, Stoneglen summoned Jaime and Gannon again. In the solar, the commander looked over a ragged map of the region north of the Wall. "We must remain vigilant. More wildlings might seek refuge. More Whites might wander near. I want patrols, but only short distances and always well armed with dragaglass. No more than a day's ride out, then back. We can't afford another loss like Tor." Gannon agreed, though the lines of grief still etched his features. "The men are frightened, but they'll follow orders. Most see the danger clearly now." Stoneglen tapped the map. "Good. We'll hold until Lady Stark gathers an army or the South sends reinforcements. If the White Walker truly roams out there, eventually we might have to confront it. But not until we have numbers." He rubbed a hand across his brow. "Jaime, you've proven yourself. The men respect you now, no matter your name. Keep them steady. We might face a siege from the dead again if the stories are right." Jaime inhaled, recalling the last time the Wall had seen a siege by the living dead before he joined the Watch when Jon Snow had commanded. Even with a fraction of that terror, they'd be tested to their limits. "I'll do what I can," he said simply. Time passed in a relentless grind. Patrols rode out and back, discovering more wildlings in small clusters, most near-starving and terrified by rumors of reanimated corpses. Some accepted refuge at Castle Black, swelling the population beyond what the kitchens could comfortably feed. Others vanished into the wilderness. More Whites were occasionally spotted. Several ended up burned in front of the gates, never making it close enough to harm the Watchers. Every time, tension coiled anew. Winter grew harsher, snows piling high against the walls. Men shivered in the yard, gloom etched on their faces. They whispered about what might happen if the White Walker appeared with a host of whites. Memories of the last war had not faded. Days lengthened into weeks. A raven arrived from Winterfell, brief, urgent words from Lady Sansa promising that her knights had shown her the Whites' remains and that she believed the threat was real. She was rallying houses loyal to her, Manderley, Serwyn, Glover, Mormont, and others. Yet the deep snows stalled their gathering. She wrote that some lords south of the Neck had been lukewarm about sending aid, especially since King's Landing had made no official pronouncement on the undead. Jaime felt a stab of anger at Daenerys Targaryen's inaction, but perhaps it was not truly her fault. The realm was large, messages slow, and many refused to believe old nightmares. In the meantime, the Watch was on its own. Jaime settled into a rhythm of leadership he had once known as a Lannister commander, only now he wore black and had no illusions of glory. He organized rotations, supervised repairs to the outer gate, and tried to keep morale afloat. The mother and child from the forest quietly lent a hand in the kitchens. The boy began to smile again. Jaime found small comfort in that. They had saved at least 2 innocents from the fate that claimed Tor. On a bitter evening when the aurora shimmered faintly in the northern sky, Gannon returned from a short patrol breathless with news. He had discovered a group of wildlings a few miles north, near a stand of blasted oaks, and they reported that several whites were roaming the area. The wildlings were prepared to come south peacefully if the Watch would escort them. Stoneglen agreed that they should. Jaime volunteered. He still had a kernel of hope that each rescue might reduce the number of fresh corpses for the dead to claim. They set out at dawn, Jaime, Gannon, Dale, and 4 others leading a spare horse loaded with provisions for the wildlings. The wind was merciless, the road half lost under new snowfall. But by midday, they found the place Gannon indicated, a cluster of storm-battered oaks. Huddled beneath them were nearly a dozen wildlings, men, women, children. They looked half-dead from hunger and cold. Some brandished makeshift spears at the crow's approach, but Gannon raised a hand in peace. Jaime urged them to come to the wall, where at least they'd have food and a roof. Suspicion lingered in their eyes, but desperation won out. One woman, older, spat at the ground. "Never thought I'd go begging crows for help. But winter's too strong." And the dead, she trailed off, revealing a torn bandage on her calf. "One almost got me." Jaime swallowed. "Let me see." The wound looked shallow, but it was fresh, and the flesh around it had a sickly color. The older woman bared her teeth. "I'll walk. No time for me." Yet behind the bravado, she trembled. Jaime wasn't sure if it was the cold or fear. They helped bandage her properly, distributing bits of dried meat to the group. Then, from the corner of his eye, Jaime caught movement in the distant treeline. He tensed, hand on his sword. A shape shifted among the pines, too far to discern clearly. Gannon followed his gaze. "Whites," he whispered. They fell silent, hearts pounding. After a long moment, the figure vanished. Possibly an animal or just a trick of the wind. But Jaime's instincts prickled. "Hurry," he urged the wildlings. "We move now." They trudged south, the group forming a ragged line. Gannon and Dale took the lead, Jaime and the others flanking the sides. The wildlings staggered with exhaustion, but necessity drove them on. Every gust of wind felt like a hidden enemy. Twice, Jaime thought he heard faint moans on the breeze, but the swirling drifts obscured everything. At last, Castle Black's dark outline rose before them in the twilight. Brothers on the ramparts waved torches, guiding them in. The gates opened and they entered. Relief swept through Jaime as they reached safety. Stoneglen came forward, directing the wildlings to the stables for shelter since the barracks were near full. They would be fed, warmed. Another dozen lives saved from the dead. Gannon turned to Jaime, brow knitted. "I could have sworn I saw something trailing us in the distance. But it never came close." Jaime frowned. Whatever it was, it disappeared. "Let's keep extra watch tonight, just in case." The night passed without incident, though a tension hung in the air. Snow battered the castle, swirling in eddies around the courtyard. Jaime, huddling by a brazier, wondered how many more nights they would endure like this, living on a knife's edge. Even if Lady Stark's forces marched tomorrow, they might still arrive too late if a White Walker led an army of whites south. Morning brought a lull in the storm. Men trudged out to shovel snow from the paths. Jaime joined them, wanting physical work to stave off brooding. As he cleared a drift by the main gate, he overheard a muffled cry from a watchman atop the wall. Then came the horn blast, one long, echoing note that rolled down through the wintry air, followed by a second. 2 blasts usually meant wildlings or allies approaching, not the dead. Jaime paused, heart hammering. The watchman's cry sounded urgent. Stoneglen emerged from a building, scanning upward. "What is it?" he shouted. The watchman's voice carried, though faintly. "A group approaches from the forest. Looks like men on foot. Possibly more wildlings." Jaime exhaled. Perhaps no new threat. Then he heard the watchman add, "They're carrying something." Several men can't see clearly through the snow. "They're coming fast." Jaime and a handful of brothers hurried to the courtyard, readying weapons just in case. The gates were opened a crack, sending a swirl of icy wind into the yard. Gradually, shapes appeared, a cluster of figures stumbling out of the tree lean, half dragging, half carrying a body. The black brother on gate duty let out a shocked oath. "Let them in," he called. Moments later, they spilled into the courtyard, northern soldiers wearing Stark sigils. One man collapsed to his knees, his face a mask of anguish. Another shouted for help. Jaime rushed forward. These were part of the group that had traveled to and from Winterfell, or some of Lady Stark's advanced scouts. He recognized one from Ser Alistair's retinue, an older knight with a bloodied bandage around his arm. They had 3 men down, one clearly unconscious, another writhing in pain. All bore savage wounds. Stoneglen arrived, pushing through the crowd. "What happened? Were you attacked by whites?" The older knight shook his head. "Worse, a White Walker. We saw it ourselves. We were on the King's Road, heading north to check rumors of more undead when it appeared. The cold, it was unnatural. It cut through us like we were children. Swords shattered. Our men, half were killed, reanimated on the spot. We barely escaped, dragging these wounded." His eyes were wild with horror. A collective gasp spread. The watchers exchanged glances of dread. Stoneglen's mouth set in a thin line. "A walker. So it's true." He raised his voice. "Get these men inside to Maester Herod quickly. Barricade the gates, keep watch for any sign of pursuit." Jaime helped carry one wounded soldier, a young man whose leg had been frozen solid from the knee down. Frostbite or something more sinister. He whimpered in delirium. The older knight recounted the encounter in broken sobs, describing a tall, pale figure cloaked in swirling cold. It had eyes like blue fire. It carried a spear of ice that froze everything it touched. "We lost half our number in heartbeats." Inside, Maester Herod and his assistants tried to treat the wounded. Jaime lingered, numb with dread. A White Walker in the gift was no small matter. Could it be the same one rumored by Auric, the same that might have roamed near Craster's? The knight insisted it was heading south, presumably accompanied by whites. If it reached the wall. Stoneglen found Jaime in the infirmary, eyes hard. "We have no time to wait for the rest of Lady Stark's army," the commander said. "We must brace ourselves. That walker is out there, raising the dead at will. Our men are too few, but we'll hold the wall as we always have. I need you at my side, helping me organize the defense. We lock down the castle, prepare the best we can. If the White Walker tries to assault us with a swarm of whites, we'll do our duty." Jaime felt a strange calm settle in him. Fear, yes, but also a stark clarity. This was it, the watch in earnest. "I'll do it," he said. "We'll use the DR. Agonglass weapons. We line the walls with pitch. We can't let them through the gate." Stoneglen's nod was grim. "We'll send final ravens to Winterfell and Eastwatch, telling them the threat is imminent. The mother and child and those who cannot fight, will send them behind the wall if possible to one of the nearby keeps. We stand or fall here." A flurry of activity followed. The courtyard became a hive of preparation. Barrels of pitch were rolled to vantage points. Archers tested bowstrings. The Black brothers readied their few supplies of dragonglass arrows. Jaime oversaw the placement of torches along the battlements, ensuring easy access to flame. The wildlings who had taken shelter were offered a choice: fight or stay hidden. Many refused to be idle, volunteering to stand with the watch if it meant survival. An unlikely alliance formed under the swirling gray sky. All day they waited, scanning the horizon. The wind picked up, carrying stinging sleet. Brothers muttered that they felt the cold intensify, as though the walker's presence spread a chill beyond normal winter. Night fell early, blanketing the land in blackness. Fires burned in the yard, men posted on every walkway. Jaime could hardly see beyond the gates, where the swirling white gloom swallowed sight. The tension was suffocating. If the White Walker came, it would come soon. Hours dragged on. Midnight approached. Stoneglen, pacing with torch in hand, looked grim. Jaime stood on the rampart, scanning the darkness, cloak snapping in the wind. Near him, Gannon clutched a dragonglass-tipped spear, face taut. They had doubled the guard, every man stationed in pairs. The mother and child were presumably hidden away in a storeroom with some others out of sight. The hush felt too deep. Then, at last, a horn blast rent the air. 1, 2, 3. The fabled triple blast that signaled White Walkers. Jaime's heart seized. Men began shouting below. Torches flared, bows drawn. Jaime peered out into the night. At first, he saw only swirling snow. Then shapes. Many shapes. A ragged mass of silhouettes shambled toward the wall. Whites at least dozens. Their eyes glowed faintly in the torchlight and their moans carried on the wind. Stoneglen bellowed commands. Archers, loose arrows. Light them if you can. Drive them back. A volley of arrows lit the night, some aflame, some tipped with dragoglass. Many whites dropped, pinned or burning, but more came on. They lurched toward the gate, clawing at the icy ground. Jaime could scarcely believe how many there were. Among them, he glimpsed the forms of men and women, even a few that might have been long-dead rangers. The gates were strong, but he feared the White Walker might do something worse, like freezing the ice to crack a path. It was rumored they had powers beyond mortal ken. A sudden hush fell as if the wind held its breath. Through the press of whites, a tall figure emerged, pale and regal in its otherworldly menace. The White Walker. Its eyes glowed blue, and in its hand was a long spear that seemed carved from living ice. It surveyed the wall with cold malice. Then it raised the spear. A keening shriek tore from the whites, who hammered at the gates and began to climb over their fallen. The men on the ramparts fired frantically. Some whites ignited, thrashing in flame. Others crumpled to the power of dragonglass. But more kept coming. Stoneglen shouted, "Boil the oil. Pour it." Brothers heaved barrels over the rampart, dousing the whites near the gate with burning pitch. The stench of burning flesh and hair filled the air. Screeches rattled the darkness. Jaime helped push one of the barrels, sending it splashing into the mass below. Flames roared up, lighting the night. Yet in the midst of the inferno, the walker strode calmly, frost forming a barrier around it. Arrows cracked uselessly against that aura of chill. Men cursed in terror. Jaime glanced at Gannon. "We might have to face it directly," he said, heart pounding. "Dragonglass or Valyrian steel? It's the only way." Gannon nodded, eyes wide. Suddenly, the walker hurled its spear at the gate. Ice exploded, shards embedding in the wood. The temperature seemed to plummet further. Part of the gate iced over as though pinned by some unnatural frost. Whites swarmed, pounding at it. Men on the ramparts rained more arrows and fire down, but the walker advanced again, raising its arms. Jaime watched in horror as fallen whites and even some newly fallen men twitched, starting to rise. Screams echoed from below. Some black brothers must have been dragged off the ramparts in the frenzy. Stoneglen turned to Jaime. "We can't let it break the gate. If it gets inside, the courtyard is a death trap." Jaime knew he was right. He saw the walker, eerily majestic, stepping near the flame's edge. Fire licked at the ground, but the cold swirling around it seemed to quell the worst of the blaze. The gate timbers creaked, half frozen. Cracks formed. Another wave of whites battered it. If it fell? Jaime's mouth went dry. He drew his sword, pointing to the stairs that led down into the gatehouse interior. "We have to meet it in the tunnel. We have dragonglass and pitch. We can hold it off or die trying." Stoneglen nodded, a solemn acceptance. They gathered a handful of brothers who did not hesitate, though terror was plain in their eyes. Gannon stayed at Jaime's side. They descended to the gatehouse, torches flickering. The gate was thick oak and iron, but was now coated in a sheen of ice from the walker's spear. Whites slammed against the other side, their moans echoing in the tunnel. Stoneglen commanded men to stand ready with barrels of pitch, torches in hand. Another group readied the scorpions, large crossbow-like contraptions that could fire heavier dragoglass bolts. The plan was simple. If the gate gave way, they would unleash fire, bolt, and sword. The narrow tunnel might contain the undead enough to give them a chance. A thunderous crack jolted the tunnel. The men tensed. Splinters fell from the gate. Another blow. Then, with a final groan, the wood fractured. The walker's frosty aura had weakened it. A corner of the gate caved in, letting in a rush of icy wind. Through that gap, whites poured in, snarling. Men shouted, lighting the pitch. Fire spread. The first wave of whites collapsed, howling as flames devoured them. Jaime joined the front line, sword in his left hand, dragoglass dagger at his waist. A rotting corpse lunged, and he parried, hacking its head. Another grabbed at him from the side, and Gannon impaled it with a spear. The stench of burning undead choked the tunnel. But more kept coming. The gate shattered further, revealing the towering silhouette of the walker. White and cold, it stepped through flame as though it were mist. A hush of dread ran through the men. Stoneglen aimed a scorpion, loosing a dragoglass bolt. The projectile whistled through the tunnel. The walker moved with inhuman speed, twisting aside. The bolt shattered on the ice-laced stone. Another scorpion fired, missing as well. Jaime's heart thundered. This was beyond mortal skill. The walker glided forward, spear leveled. "Pull back!" Stoneglen roared. Brothers scrambled for distance, but whites poured in behind the walker, blocking the retreat. Jaime found himself face to face with the creature, separated by only a few yards of firelit tunnel. He recalled old stories. A white walker could shatter steel, freeze a man's blood with a touch. Only dragoglass or Valyrian steel could kill it. He forced down terror, raising his sword. He had dragoglass and the dagger at his belt, but first he had to get close without being skewered. The walker's eyes fixed on him with a malevolent glow. Its spear whipped forward. Jaime dodged left, feeling the air turn frigid where the spear passed. Frost crackled along the stone wall. He slashed with his sword at the walker's flank, but the creature parried with effortless grace, the spear's haft colliding with metal. Sparks flew. Jaime's blade nearly jerked from his left hand, the impact numbing his wrist. The walker loomed, silent as death. From the corner of his vision, Jaime saw Gannon try to thrust a dragoglass spear at the creature's back. The walker spun, faster than thought, batting Gannon aside with a swing that cracked bones. Gannon collapsed with a cry. Jaime lunged again, sword tip aimed at the walker's chest. The pale figure blocked with the spear, then twisted the weapon, hooking Jaime's blade. A surge of supernatural cold flooded up Jaime's arm. He grit his teeth, desperate not to drop the weapon. The walker's strength was immense, it flung Jaime back. He crashed into the tunnel wall, hearing a crack in his shoulder. Pain flared white-hot. The walker advanced. Jaime coughed, struggling to stand. His sword hand trembled, nearly useless from the shock. His stump ached with phantom agony. He fumbled for the dragonglass dagger at his belt. If he could land even one blow. Stoneglen and two others tried to intercept the walker. One man was skewered instantly by that icy spear. The other swung a torch only for the walker to freeze the flame in mid-lash, extinguishing it. Stoneglen, roaring defiance, slammed a dragoglass axe into the walker's side. For a fleeting moment, Jaime thought it might work. But the walker twisted, partially deflecting the blow with an arm. Frost spiderwebbed across Stoneglen's axe handle, then shattered it. The commander staggered back, the weapon broken. The walker's spear flashed forward, catching Stoneglen in the chest. Jaime heard the sickening crunch. Stoneglen gasped, eyes wide, as he fell. Rage and horror coursed through Jaime. His vow. He had to stop this abomination. He forced himself upright, ignoring the searing pain in his shoulder, the numbness in his left arm. The whites behind the walker pressed closer, but the flames from the barrels slowed them. Jaime lunged, dagger in hand, aiming for the walker's exposed back. This time, the creature turned too slowly. Jaime plunged the dragoglass blade forward. A piercing, eldritch shriek tore from the walker's mouth as the dagger found flesh. Cold exploded around Jaime, stabbing his skin like knives of ice. He screamed as frost spread over his cloak. The walker whirled, eyes blazing, spear thrusting. Jaime felt the spear tear into his side, an agony of freezing steel. But he refused to let go of the dagger. He twisted it, driving it deeper. The white walker's shriek rose to a mind-shattering pitch. Cracks of pale light appeared across its form, webbing outward from the dagger's wound. Jaime watched in dazed wonder as the creature's limbs froze, fracturing like glass. Then, with a final wail, it collapsed into shards of pale crystal, dissolving into wind-blown snow. Everything blurred. The whites near the walker faltered, some staggering aimlessly. Others still moved, but the unholy impetus behind them seemed diminished. Brothers rushed in with torches and dragoglass, cutting down the remaining undead. The walker's destruction left a swirl of frigid air, laced with crystals that glittered in the torchlight. Jaime collapsed onto his knees, the spear wound a burning icicle in his side. Men shouted around him, finishing off whites. Fire roared and the gatehouse tunnel filled with smoke and death. Jaime could barely see. Hands grabbed him, pulling him away from the center of the fray. He heard Gannon's weak voice somewhere behind him. The last thing Jaime saw was the shattered shards of the walker dissolving into the snow, a faint glow fading from them. Then darkness claimed him. He drifted in and out of consciousness. At times, he felt warmth, a sense of movement, men carrying him. His side burned with a cold so deep it felt like flame. In half-lucid dreams, he saw Cersei's face, then Brienne's, then the face of the walker, eyes blazing blue. He heard the vow, "I am the shield that guards the realms of men." That vow pounded like a drum in his mind. When he finally opened his eyes to steady light, he found himself in the infirmary. The air was warmer than he remembered. Bandages wrapped his torso and he felt a heavy ache in his left shoulder. Maester Harrod stood over him, relief flooding his features. "You're awake," the maester said, pressing a cup to his lips. "Drink this. It's willow bark and poppy. It will help with the pain." Jaime sipped, tasting bitterness. He tried to speak, but his throat was raw. Harrod lifted a water skin to let him drink. Gradually memory returned. He croaked, "The walker." Herod nodded. You killed it. Or so they say. The gatehouse was a slaughter, but the White Walker is destroyed. Many whites collapsed when it died or were burned. We survived. Jaime closed his eyes, relief and grief tangling in his heart. Stoneglen. The maester's face fell. He's gone. Gannon, too. Both took mortal wounds. I'm sorry. A wave of sorrow washed over Jaime. Stoneglen, the pragmatic, sturdy Lord Commander, dead. Gannon, who had fought by Jaime's side many times, also dead. Others as well, no doubt. All to protect the realm from a second coming of the dead. Jaime felt tears burn the corners of his eyes, a raw grief he could not name. But they had won, at least for now. The White Walker was gone. Herod set a comforting hand on Jaime's shoulder. You saved us or helped to. The men are calling you a hero. Jaime let out a ragged breath. He had never felt less like a hero. All he could see were the faces of those who had died. How many, he couldn't finish. Too many, Herod said gently. But some are alive because of your stand. It might not feel like victory, but it is won. The whites outside the gate fell back when the Walker died. They were destroyed by fire or scattered. Jaime sank into the pillow, body weak. He listened as Herod explained that in the days since the battle, men had cleared the courtyard of whites, burned corpses, and repaired the shattered gate. More crows from the Shadow Tower and Eastwatch had arrived to help. Lady Stark's outriders came soon after. They found the White Walker's shards evidence enough for them to believe. Word spread quickly that Jaime Lannister, once Kingslayer, had helped kill the Walker with dragonglass. It was a tale the realm would repeat. Jaime himself felt only the weight of loss. In the weeks that followed, Jaime recovered slowly, tended by Maester Herod. His wounds were severe, the Walker's spear had left a chill that no fire could fully remove, and his left shoulder might never be the same. Yet he forced himself to walk, wincing with every step, to see the castle he had fought for. Castle Black was battered but standing. Smoke rose from new fires, Black brothers drilled in the yard, and the wildlings who had taken shelter helped rebuild. The mother and child survived. People spoke in hushed, respectful tones when Jaime passed, calling him brother. At length, word arrived that Lady Sansa Stark was coming north with a retinue to see the aftermath herself. By that point, the white threat had diminished drastically with the Walker's demise. Stray pockets of undead might remain, but the driving force was gone. Jaime heard that the southern lords were alarmed by the news, though some still downplayed it. He found it hard to care about their politics. The real war had been here, in the cold and darkness, and the Night's Watch had paid the price. A hush settled over Castle Black on the day Sansa Stark arrived, escorted by a column of knights. Jaime stood in the courtyard, leaning on a cane. His side still pained him, but he had insisted on being present. The gates opened and Lady Stark rode in, her red hair catching the pale sunlight. She surveyed the battered fortress with grave eyes. Brothers knelt or bowed their heads. Jaime inclined his head, uncertain how to greet her. They had never truly spoken before. She dismounted, handing the reins to a guard. Glancing around at the charred walls and recent repairs, she exhaled softly. You have all suffered, she said. Her voice carried. On behalf of the North, you have our thanks. Word of this new threat was not in vain. You have saved lives by stopping it here. A Black brother stepped forward, introduced himself as Interim Commander Gale, a senior ranger who had taken Stoneglen's place. Sansa's eyes flicked to Jaime, recognition lighting her features. Perhaps she recalled him from King's Landing or from stories. She approached, steps echoing in the hush. Jaime straightened, ignoring the ache in his spine. Sir Jaime, she said quietly. Or should I say, Brother Jaime? He managed a small nod. My lady. I took the Black. I am no sire, no lord. She studied his bandaged side. I hear you nearly gave your life to stop the White Walker. The North will not forget that. He swallowed, still uneasy at such praise. I only did my duty. Others gave more. Her expression softened. I know. The Night's Watch always does. It seems you have found your place, Jaime Lannister. She paused, then gave the faintest hint of a sad smile. Thank you. He couldn't speak past the lump in his throat. Instead, he bowed his head, feeling the reality of everything that had transpired. He had come to the wall seeking a new life, and here, amid ice and death, he had found a purpose. The realm would never know the fullness of the sacrifices made here, but that was the way of the Watch. No song needed to be sung for them. They stood, silent and steadfast, until the threat passed. As Sansa moved on, conferring with Gale about reinforcing the wall and taking in wildlings, Jaime let out a slow breath. The cold wind brushed his face, but it no longer felt quite as harsh. He thought of Stoneglen, Gannon, Tor, and all the others who had fallen, men who died protecting a kingdom that might never truly appreciate them. But that was their oath. That was his oath. He remembered the words, letting them resonate deep in his chest. Night gathers, and now my watch begins. Outside, the wind keened across the snow-swept plains. Inside Castle Black, life pressed on. Rifts were mended, the wounded healed. Refugees found shelter. The watch braced for whatever winter still held in store, but the immediate crisis had passed, the White Walker destroyed. Jaime was left with scars visible and unseen, but also with a soul unburdened by the sins he once carried. If redemption truly existed, he had taken a step toward it here, at the edge of the world. As the winter deepened and rumors reached them of the South's endless intrigues, Jaime felt no longing to return. His place was here, wearing black until he died. He had lost a hand, lost illusions, lost everything that once defined him. But he had gained a cause worth spilling blood for, a vow that was at last untainted by Lannister gold or the madness of kings. He walked the ramparts, his cane tapping the stone, watching the horizon for any flicker of movement. The realm would sleep safer now, the winter was far from over. He would remain at his post, the sword in the darkness. In the hush of the northern sky, he found a grim sword of peace. He stood there until dusk, the last traces of daylight dying against the colossal wall. Snow drifted, covering footprints in the courtyard below. He listened to the quiet, recalling all that had brought him here. Cersei, King's Landing, the lion's roar, those echoes were faint now. He was Jaime of the Night's Watch, and that was enough. If ever the dead rose again, he would meet them with steel and fire. Until then, his duty was to guard. The vow whispered in his mind like an old friend, I am the watcher on the walls. And so he watched, while winter raged and the world turned and the battered black banner of the watch still flew against the gathering dark. Jaime Lannister stood on the battlements of Castle Black, gazing out over a landscape of snowdrifts and bare trees, all of it tinted lavender by the setting sun. Weeks had passed since the White Walker's defeat within the tunnel, yet in his mind, it still felt raw, as though it had happened yesterday. The monstrous cold of that spear, the hideous shriek as his dragaglass dagger bit home Gannon's broken body lying on the frozen ground. A swirl of regret and hollow triumph churned in Jaime's chest. Stoneglen, Gannon, Tor, the men who had died that night haunted him, whether in dreams or in the lonely hush of early mornings. Castle Black had stood, battered but unbroken, and the deathly chill that accompanied the White Walker had receded. Now the days felt marginally lighter, as if winter's grip had loosened in the wake of that ancient foe's destruction. But there were always new tasks at the wall, always new burdens for the Black brothers to bear. He had not yet fully recovered from the wound in his side. Every step still brought a flare of pain if he moved too quickly, and the left shoulder he had slammed into the tunnel wall ached whenever he tried to raise his sword arm too high. At times, his breath shortened if he climbed a staircase too quickly, and he worried that the cold had settled inside him as some lasting affliction. Maester Herod insisted it would improve in time, that the White Walker's icy spear had pierced muscle and bone but missed vital organs. Still, Jaime felt diminished, older and stiffer than before, as though he had aged a decade in a handful of heartbeats. He turned away from the northern horizon and headed along the ramparts toward the scaffolding that led to the courtyard. Snow crunched beneath his boots. There were fewer men on watch now than on the night of the battle. They still kept double shifts in the small hours, but the immediate crisis had passed with the Walker's destruction. New whites had not appeared. The scattered corpses left behind after that climactic battle had been burned on massive pyres outside the gate. Since then, the wall had remained quiet, though no one took it for granted. The free folk who had gathered for refuge were still here, and a few more trickled in from the wilderness, but the large-scale movements had ceased. Word had spread fast, the White Walker was gone, and the second thread of a long night had been cut short. A cold wind whipped across the top of the wall, buffeting Jaime's cloak as he limped toward the creaking wooden lift that would take him down. The watchers on duty saluted him. He still wasn't sure he'd ever grown comfortable with that. They considered him a hero. He considered himself a battered man doing what had to be done, but it was not in his nature to reject their respect outright. He would simply endure it as he endured the pain in his ribs, the ache in the stump of his right arm, the swirl of ghosts behind his eyelids. One of the Black brothers operating the lift pulled a lever, and the wooden cage shuddered, descending with a series of groaning pulleys. Jaime inhaled sharply as a twinge bit into his side. The breath fogged in front of him, white as a ghost. The wind made the rope sway, each jolt sending a spike of discomfort through him, but he clenched his jaw and said nothing. He might not be the swordsman he once was, but he could still refuse to let pain define him. Leaning against the cage's frame, he watched the courtyard come into view below, men carrying bundles of wood, a scrawny goat bleeding by the stables, a group of wildlings working with black brothers to clear more snow. The wind carried the echoes of conversation, the dull ring of a hammer from the forge, and the subdued murmur of a fortress that could finally breathe. He stepped off the lift, forced a semblance of a confident stride, and made his way across the yard toward the common hall. A handful of men who noticed him gave respectful nods. Some of them had once despised him for his Lannister heritage, now they looked upon him with something like reverence. He returned their greetings with polite acknowledgement. A year ago, had it really been a year since he first arrived, he would never have believed that he would stand here as a near-cripple wearing black, receiving the thanks of men who once spat his name. Fate had a twisted sense of humor. At the entrance to the common hall, he found a cluster of new arrivals, 3 men from Winterfell wearing Stark livery. They'd arrived to help coordinate the supply lines from the north now that Lady Sansa Stark had recognized the renewed threat. All were men of middle age, used to the cold, and they looked less intimidated by the wall than most southern knights would be. They were conversing with Gald, the acting Lord Commander since Stoneglen's death. Jaime nodded to Gald as he approached. The older ranger had survived that night's horrors in the gatehouse by pure fortune, never having come face to face with the Walker. Now he carried the enormous burden of leadership, though Jaime offered as much help as he could. "Sir Jaime," said one of the Stark men, a ruddy-faced fellow named Jorin. He caught himself. "I mean Brother Jaime." Jaime gave a small, patient smile. "Just Jaime is fine." He was still unaccustomed to corrections, but most people outside the Night's Watch still reached for his old title. They saw the once famous Kingslayer, not the black-cloaked Watcher. "How goes the supply route?" Jorin scratched at his patchy beard. "We have new wagons on the way. If the roads stay passable, we should keep you stocked with barley and salt meat for the remainder of winter. Lady Stark also sends word that she will soon dispatch more weapons, arrows, spears, a bit of dragonglass from the caches discovered near Dragonstone. Not a lot, mind you, but enough to restock your supply." Gald exhaled in relief. "That's good. The last White Walker took a heavy toll on our dragonglass. We've been forging arrowheads out of the shards we had left, but we can't produce more here." Jorin nodded. "As soon as the weather breaks a bit, caravans will start to arrive. Lady Stark wants the wall to remain secure. The news of that Walker's defeat has already made it to the Riverlands and even the Vale. Everybody wants to ensure no more linger beyond the wall." Jaime felt an odd stir. The sense that for once, the realm might be paying attention to the Watch before it was too late. "We appreciate Lady Stark's aid," he said. "Without the North's help, we'd be scraping the bottom of our barrels." Gald clasped arms with Jorin in a show of gratitude, and the group moved on. Jaime lingered a moment longer, letting them file into the warmth of the common hall. He turned away, deciding to visit the infirmary before taking his own supper. He needed another salve for his side, or at least another bandage. He trudged through the swirling snow, past the smithy where a couple of black brothers hammered out simple repairs to armor. They had so little steel that most men wore boiled leather or mismatched scraps taken from old storerooms or donated by the North. The handful of suits that remained from the old days were battered relics. At least the threat had abated enough that men did not feel the need to remain fully armed at all times. Even so, each black brother carried a dagger. Most had a dragonglass blade in addition. The infirmary was a modest tower adjacent to the rear wall of the courtyard. Inside, a small iron stove offered a comforting glow of heat. Shelves lined the walls, holding jars of dried herbs, potions, bandages. Maester Harrod was bent over a bench, grinding something in a mortar. He glanced up as Jaime entered. "Your side again, I expect," Harrod said, not unkindly. The man was gray-haired, with a patient, somber face. He had seen more horrors than he ever wanted in this place. From frostbite to white bites, from half-starved wildlings to battered black brothers. Still, he performed his duties with a quiet diligence. "It's a bit worse today," Jaime admitted, lifting the edge of his cloak to reveal the bandaged portion. "I felt it tug badly when I was out on the ramparts." Harrod set aside the mortar. "Sit," he ordered, gesturing to a stool. Jaime complied, wincing. The maester carefully unwrapped the bandage, exposing a line of puckered flesh that ran along his ribs. The wound had closed, but the skin around it remained discolored, faintly bluish, as if the White Walker's chill had left an imprint. Herod inspected it closely. No fresh swelling. Good. But you need more rest than you're allowing yourself. Jaime mustered a half-smile. It's the wall, Maester. There's never enough rest here. Herod only grunted in mild disapproval, then applied a fresh salve that made Jaime hiss from the sting. After rebandaging it, Herod pressed a small vial into Jaime's hand. Mix a few drops of this in water before you sleep. It should help with the pain. Jaime nodded his thanks. He rose, ignoring the protest from his side, and turned to leave. Just then, the door opened and a young woman hurried in, one of the free folk who had taken refuge here. Her face was pale with alarm. Maester, she gasped, one of ours fell from the walkway. Hurt his leg bad. Please come. Herod nodded curtly. Lead me, he said. He grabbed a satchel of supplies, gave Jaime a look that said, this is my life now, then followed the woman out. Jaime sighed. The infirmary was empty except for a pair of cots with neat blankets. The freed folk took as many injuries as the crows did, be it from a slip on ice or residual run-ins with stray undead. Jaime set the vial in his pocket, letting out a long breath. This was normal day-to-day existence at Castle Black, overshadowed by the memory of what had nearly happened but colored with the relief that life went on. He made his way out to the yard again. Stars peeked through ragged clouds overhead, the last of twilight fading. He started toward the common hall, intending to get something warm to eat when he spotted a swirl of motion by the main gate. The portcullis was half lowered, but the smaller postern door opened, letting in two black brothers who had evidently been on a short patrol. Both looked half-frozen, scarves pulled up over their noses, hoods dusted with snow. Jaime changed course, interested in any new tidings from beyond the wall. The men removed their hoods and greeted the guards at the gate. One was a lanky ranger named Lyle, the other a compact older man called Rowan. Jaime knew them casually. They'd taken part in the rear guard the night the White Walker attacked. He approached, raising a hand in greeting. What news? He asked. Rowan rubbed his chapped hands. Quiet out there, mostly. No sign of whites, no sign of anything except footprints from a small group of wildlings traveling east. Could be an offshoot clan that missed the rumor that the walkers are gone. Gone or almost gone, Lyle added, then spat. It still feels uneasy out there. The trees are too silent, but no direct trouble to report. Jaime nodded. Good. Get inside, warm yourselves. The two men trudged away, stamping their feet, eager for a hot meal. Jaime gazed a moment at the gate, remembering the night it had shattered, the shards of ice from the walker's spear. They had replaced the damaged timbers with heavy beams from an old watchtower, but the memory of that night's horror was carved into each new board. Even now, a faint line of scarred ice remained on the threshold stone, never fully melting. Some in the watch said it would never melt, that it was a permanent reminder. Jaime's wound likewise refused to fade entirely. His stomach rumbled, so he crossed the yard to the common hall. Inside, the air was thick with the smell of stew and the sound of low conversation. Men and women sat at benches, many wearing black, some wearing patched furs. There was no true separation anymore between free folk and crows, not in the daily routine. The children laughed around a corner where an older man carved wooden trinkets to keep them occupied. The initial wariness between groups had softened, though it still lingered in some corners. No one had forgotten the tensions of the past, but the shared battle forged a cautious alliance. Jaime received a wooden bowl of stew from the kitchen helpers and found a place at a table along the wall. He lowered himself gingerly, biting back a wince. As he began to eat, someone spoke quietly from his side. May I sit? He looked up to see the woman and boy who had been rescued from the forest. They had been with him on that fateful patrol, the one where Tor was scratched and later died. The boy had grown healthier over the past weeks. He had color in his cheeks again. His mother offered a tentative smile. It's crowded, she said, glancing around, but if it's no trouble. Not at all, Jaime said. The two settled beside him, the boy eyeing Jaime's cloak. He had once seemed terrified by everything about this place, but the child's eyes now held an almost shy curiosity. The mother introduced herself softly. I'm Haleth, and this is Aemon. She had told him that once, but it had been in the chaos of their arrival. Perhaps she was reasserting it to confirm they were more than ghosts passing through. Jaime, he said. I'm glad to see you both well. We owe that to you, Haleth said. I never thanked you properly. You brought us here, saved us from freezing or from those things. Her voice trembled slightly. I've lost so much, but at least he's safe now. Jaime wasn't sure how to respond. He remembered a time he had cared only about his family and the illusions of power. Now he took an odd satisfaction in seeing people like Haleth and Aemon living under the Watch's roof. I'm glad you found some measure of peace, he said. How are you faring? She glanced at Aemon, who was busily munching on bread. We help in the kitchens, the stables. Sometimes I wash linens. Aemon is learning his letters from one of your men who can write. We have a roof and food, so yes, it's better than we ever had in the wild. She paused, letting out a soft breath. There's talk we might be allowed to settle in the Gift, the lands south of the wall, once the thaw begins. Lord Commander Gale or Lady Stark will likely approve, Jaime said, finishing his stew. If you choose to go, you'll have farmland. Safer than the far north. She nodded, though her eyes flickered with uncertainty. We've never had farmland, but I'll do whatever it takes to keep Aemon alive. She hesitated, then changed the subject, perhaps wanting to lighten it. You still ache? You move like a wounded bear. Jaime gave a rueful smile. I suppose I do. The maester says it'll heal in time. The White Walker's spear didn't do me any lasting magical harm, but I'm no longer a young warrior. He tapped his stump of a hand, swaddled in black leather. I've known that for a while. Aemon looked up. You killed it, though. The monster. My friend said so. For a moment, Jaime couldn't speak. He saw an echo of admiration in the boy's face, the kind of wide-eyed respect children once showed knights in shining armor. It tightened something in Jaime's chest. He forced a smile. It was a group effort, he said quietly. Many brave men fought that night. Some didn't live to tell the tale. Aemon's gaze dropped. His mother smoothed his hair. I know about sacrifice, she whispered. We all do. They let the subject fade, finishing their meal in companionable silence. Jaime left them eventually with a nod, feeling their gratitude as a subtle weight that warmed him more than the stew. If he had ever asked the gods for redemption, perhaps saving families like that was the shape it would take. After supper, he stepped outside into the courtyard once more. The night sky stretched overhead, stars glimmering. Torches lined the walls. A hush lay over the fortress, broken only by the occasional clank of a barrel or the rattle of the smith's hammer. Gale had asked him to come to the Lord Commander's solar this evening for a talk about the next steps. Jaime suspected it concerned the indefinite future of the Watch, the Free Folk, and the uncertain realm beyond. He climbed the steps to the solar slowly, mindful of his side. Gale was inside, poring over a table strewn with parchments. A brazier provided flickering light, casting Gale's face in shifting shadows. He looked up as Jaime entered. Sit, Gale said, gesturing to a stool. Jaime did so, ignoring the twinge in his ribs. Gale rubbed a hand across his brow. He was a grizzled man in his late 40s, with short gray hair and a nose that had been broken more than once. He had been second or third in line of command under Stoneglen, but after Stoneglen's death, the men had accepted Gale as the acting Lord Commander, at least until a formal choosing could occur. We have matters to discuss about the future, Gale said. Jaime nodded, folding his arms over his cloak. What's on your mind? Gale drummed his fingers on the parchment. We have near 100 new free folk, plus many from the earlier influx. The courtyard can't hold them all, let alone feed them comfortably. We're rationing carefully, but if winter doesn't ease soon, we'll have to open some of the abandoned keeps along the wall or expand the gift. And then there's the question of the Watch's numbers. We're down to just over 100 crows if we discount the wounded and the green boys. That's too few to properly man Castle Black, let alone the entire wall. Jaime understood the frustration. The Night's Watch had once been a mighty order, thousands strong, maintaining multiple castles along the wall. Now only 3 or 4 main castles remained garrisoned, Castle Black, Eastwatch by the Sea, and the Shadow Tower. Even those were undermanned. The rest were ruins or ghost fortresses. So we can't keep all these free folk in one place, Jaime said, leaning forward. Unless Lady Stark sends enough supplies. Gale grimaced. She's helping. More caravans are on the way. But she has her own realm to feed. Each day we rely on her generosity is another day we become dependent on the Starks. Once, the Watch was separate from the realms, but now we need their backing just to survive the winter. He paused. I don't fault Lady Stark. She's done more for us than most. But the reality is, we can't feed everyone if this winter lingers for years. We have a partial solution. Some of the free folk might prefer to move south, farm the gift, or even rebuild deserted villages. But the question is how to structure it. Jaime considered. We might propose a new agreement with Lady Stark. Let the free folk who want to farm do so under her nominal authority, or the Watches as free tenants. That's how it was partly arranged after the last war, I believe, with Jon Snow's involvement. The difference is that we have no living king in the north now, just Lady Stark as the de facto ruler. Many free folk are suspicious of kneeling to lords. But if we frame it as a necessity to avoid starving. Yes, exactly, Gale said. He sighed. Another problem, we're overdue for a formal election of the Lord Commander. It's tradition. The men have been pushing me to accept the title, but I don't relish it. I was never meant to lead. Stoneglen was a better commander, and you, some of them even whisper your name, Jaime. They say you killed a White Walker. They see that as a sign? Jaime's eyes widened in genuine surprise. Me? I'm not. I have no illusions about leading the Night's Watch. My place was always just to uphold the vow. I'm a half-crippled man from a disgraced house, Gald. Many might still hold grudges. True enough, Gald said with a bleak smile, yet some men believe you've repaid whatever debt your family owes. No man doubts your courage or your loyalty these days. In any case, I'd just as soon pass the burden to someone else. But I know my duty. We'll see how the vote goes when we finally hold it. Might be me, might be you, might be someone else. Just be prepared. Jaime felt uneasy. He had never considered taking such a position. He was done with leading armies and lording over others. The watch was different, but the thought still churned his stomach. I'll keep that in mind, he said quietly. When do you plan to hold the election? Once winter eases enough that more of our scattered brothers can gather, or once we're certain the threat is done. Some want to do it sooner, but everything's chaotic with the influx of wildlings and uncertain times. In the meantime, we need to keep the peace inside these walls. Tensions rise when men are cooped up in close quarters. I'm depending on you to help me hold it all together, Jaime. Jaime nodded solemnly. I'll do whatever's required. That was all. Gald dismissed him with a weary wave, returning to his parchments. Jaime left the Solar feeling the weight of potential responsibility settle on his shoulders. The notion of a Lord Commander Lannister was almost laughable. Still, the men might indeed vote for him, out of gratitude or misguided hero worship. He didn't want it, but sometimes fate cared little for a man's desires. He spent the next few days patrolling the castle's perimeter, checking in with men on gate duty, occasionally venturing a short way beyond the wall to ensure no new whites lurked. The free folk and crows continued to mingle, forging an uneasy but functional society. Lady Stark's caravans began to arrive in small convoys, bringing salted fish, oats, turnips, and lumps of dragonglass. A few more northern soldiers joined them, men eager to see the infamous Castle Black or to glean news of rumored White Walkers. Over time, the gloom that had lingered since the Walkers' attack lifted slightly. It felt like a fortress in transition, no longer an outpost under immediate siege, but not quite returning to normalcy. Many men had died, including beloved leaders. Others had endured heartbreak. Everyone realized that the realm had dodged a second cataclysm by the narrowest of margins. One afternoon, Jaime took a short walk in the courtyard, trying to exercise his stiff joints without overtaxing his wound. The sun was bright but cold, reflecting off the snow in a glare that hurt his eyes. He paused near the stables, where a few newly arrived horses whickered at each other. The free folk who had herded them south from the gift were brushing them down, while a black brother oversaw feed distribution. Jaime watched a moment, letting his mind wander. A voice startled him. Jaime Lannister? He turned to see a woman of middle height, clad in thick gray and white furs, flanked by two men who bore the sigil of House Mormont. Her face was stern and lined with gray streaks in her dark hair, though she carried herself like a soldier. The men behind her were armed with axes. They wore expressions that hovered between caution and curiosity. That's me, Jaime said, inclining his head in greeting. Brother of the Night's Watch now. She looked him up and down as if measuring him. I am Nara Mormont, cousin to the late Lady Lyanna. We came from Bear Island with supplies for Castle Black. I heard you slew a White Walker. I wanted to see for myself if the rumors were true. Jaime resisted the urge to sigh. This was becoming a common refrain. I was part of the group that destroyed it, he said. I struck the finishing blow with dragonglass, but I didn't do it alone. Nara let out a small hum of contemplation. What was it like, if you'll indulge me? He thought of the savage cold, the inhuman speed, the way it shattered at last. Terrifying, he admitted. It was like facing living ice, a being older than any realm we know. I barely survived. Many did not. She nodded slowly as if filing that information away. You've done the North a service. Bear Island stands with Winterfell in acknowledging that threat. We're sending a handful of our men to help garrison the wall for a time. Not many, but enough to keep watch on what remains beyond. We can't let our guard down again. That's wise, Jaime said, glad to see the North's readiness. Any help is welcome. Her gaze flicked to his bandaged side, noticing how he stood slightly hunched. You're still wounded? He shrugged with his good shoulder. A scratch from that spear. It lingers. She gave a grunt. Sometimes the old magic leaves a mark that doesn't heal quickly. May the gods watch over you. With that, she and her men strode away, presumably to find Gald or to unload their supplies. Jaime exhaled, leaning against the stable post. Another curious soul come to confirm the story. Word had spread far, White Walkers weren't dead after all, but nearly rose to start a second long night. The men of House Mormont had always been staunch allies of the Starks, so their presence here made sense. He hoped it would continue forging ties between the Watch and the northern houses. If another threat ever emerged, they would need unity again. Just as he was about to move on, a stable hand approached. Brother Jaime, a raven arrived for you, the young man said, sounding odd that the raven was specifically addressed to Jaime. It's in the rookery. Jaime frowned. For me? Are you certain? Your name was on the parchment. Didn't know you had correspondence? Maester Herod said to fetch you. Confusion tugged at Jaime's mind. He had written no letters to anyone in the south or elsewhere. Possibly it was from Lady Stark. He nodded to the stable hand. I'll go at once. He trudged across the yard to the rookery tower, passing lines of newly arrived horses and men hauling crates. At the tower's base, he ascended a spiral staircase into a circular chamber full of wooden perches, each holding restless ravens. Maester Herod had an assistant here, a boy named Cedric, who guided Jaime to a small desk. A single parchment lay there, bearing Jaime's name in a neat script. The boy hovered, curious, until Jaime dismissed him with a slight gesture. Then Jaime broke the seal and examined the parchment. He recognized the handwriting immediately, Tyrion's. A jolt of emotion shot through him. Tyrion, his brother, the clever dwarf who had once served as Hand of the Queen, had vanished from Jaime's life after the final stages of war in the south. Jaime had heard only scattered rumors of Tyrion advising Daenerys Targaryen or traveling overseas on some mission. Never anything certain. Yet here was a letter, short but undeniably in Tyrion's sardonic voice. Jaime, I hope this raven finds you upright and breathing. Word has reached me, gods know how, that you joined the Night's Watch. More, that you slew a White Walker or helped slay one. I assume you didn't lose your other hand in the process, or else how did you hold the dagger? I'm in a curious position these days, though I won't elaborate in writing. Suffice it to say, Queen Daenerys has heard troubling reports of undead stirring anew in the north. I expect your vantage from that icy seat at the end of the world is more accurate than any rumor. If you're still alive, write back. I'd like to know the truth of things from someone I trust. Yes, I suppose I do trust you, even if you once threatened to strangle me. Times change. Yours in guarded optimism. Tyrion. Jaime let out a shaky breath. He hadn't realized until this moment how much he wanted some contact with his surviving brother. The letter was dated over a fortnight ago, and the route from the south had likely been circuitous. Tyrion was alive, seemingly still aligned with Daenerys Targaryen. Perhaps more than aligned, he sounded as if he served at her side still. That alone raised countless questions. Did she truly rule in King's Landing? Had she consolidated her power? Were there new wars raging beyond the Watcher's knowledge? Jaime leaned against the desk, rereading the letter. Tyrion wanted a truthful account. Well, he could provide that. The White Walker had indeed risen, threatened the wall, nearly spelled doom until Jaime and his brothers destroyed it. He felt an odd flutter of relief that Tyrion had reached out first. Jaime had parted ways with the Lannisters in a swirl of bitterness, but the bond with Tyrion had always been stronger than any resentment. He found a scrap of parchment and a quill, ignoring the twinge in his side, and began to compose a reply in a neat, if somewhat unpolished, hand. Tyrion, I live though battered. Your news is correct. I joined the Night's Watch, and we indeed fought a White Walker that arose beyond the wall, reanimating whites. Many good men died before we destroyed it. The threat seems contained now. I do not know how many walkers might have survived the last war, but at least this one is gone. As to the realm's broader state, the north is under Lady Sansa Stark's rule, and she aids the Watch with supplies. I have heard little of King's Landing or Queen Daenerys, only rumors that she remains on the throne. If you still serve her, perhaps you can persuade her not to forget the Night's Watch if more threats appear. But for now, we endure in our black cloaks, as always. Write again if you will. You've no notion how glad I am to hear from you. Jaime Lannister, sworn brother of the Night's Watch. He hesitated, then added a final line. I never blamed you for what befell our family. Stay safe, little brother. He signed it, folded the parchment, and addressed it to Tyrion Lannister in King's Landing, though he was uncertain precisely where his brother might be. Perhaps the ravens at the Red Keep would find him. That was the best he could do. He beckoned Cedric, who promptly took the missive, attaching it to a raven's leg with deft hands. Jaime watched the bird flutter off into the gray sky, bearing words he had never thought he would write. Leaving the rookery, he felt a strange sense of weight and possibility. If Tyrion responded, maybe they could heal some fractures between them. Cersei's ghost lingered in Jaime's memories, but he wanted to believe he had severed that tie. Tyrion was different. They had parted with less rancor, still wounded, but not beyond repair. Over the next few days, Jaime found himself anticipating a response from the south, though logically he knew it might take weeks or longer if it arrived at all. He busied himself with the daily routine of the watch. Gale organized a series of tasks to reinforce the outbuildings for the newly arrived free folk. Wagons from Winterfell continued to trickle in, along with more northern knights. Lady Sansa herself had not returned since her initial visit, but she sent frequent messages with updates on the realm's condition. Word came that Daenerys Targaryen indeed sat on the Iron Throne, though rumors suggested some unrest in the southern reaches. Jaime gleaned only fragments from travelers, but it seemed the Queen's hold was not uncontested. Even so, no major civil war had broken out yet. The rest of Westeros was likely grappling with the aftershocks of the prior battles. Amid these developments, the relationship between crows and free folk stabilized. Some brawls occurred. A black brother punched a wildling for stealing from the storeroom, or a wildling scorned a crow's haughty tone, but overall, the ephemeral unity that had formed during the Walker crisis held. Many free folk helped shovel snow, man the gates, or gather firewood. They realized that survival hinged on working alongside these men in black. One crisp morning, Jaime found himself assisting a group of them in clearing out an unused stable that might serve as lodging for more families. The sun was bright overhead, though the wind remained icy. He was hauling out rotted boards, ignoring the dull ache that accompanied every movement when he saw Haleth and her boy Aemon approach. Aemon wore a determined look, carrying a small hammer. Jaime nodded in greeting. "You two volunteering for the labor?" he asked with a faint smile. Haleth brushed a strand of hair from her face. "We heard you needed extra hands." Aemon wanted to help. "Says he's big enough now." Aemon lifted his chin proudly. "I can hammer nails in the boards, see?" Jaime regarded the boy. He looked to be maybe 9 or 10, still slight, but there was a spark in his eyes. "All right," Jaime said, "but be careful with your fingers. I only have one good hand left myself." He offered a mock-serious wink. Aemon gave a small grin, though he swallowed hard at the reminder of Jaime's missing hand. They set to work, pulling up rotten planks from the stable floor, replacing them with fresh boards that had come up from the south. The labor was tedious, the stable thick with dust. Several other free folk hammered away while a couple of black brothers supervised. Jaime found a measure of satisfaction in physical work. With each blow of the hammer, he banished restless thoughts about the future, about Tyrion's letter, about the election looming. He just drove nails, letting the sweat bead on his forehead despite the cold. Halfway through the day, he paused to catch his breath, leaning on his hammer. Aemon was a short distance away, struggling to align a board. Jaime walked over, guiding the boy's hands on the hammer. "Like this," he said. "Keep your wrist steady, strike with a clean motion." Aemon nodded, biting his lip in concentration. The nail went in straight. The boy's face lit up with pride. Haleth watched from a few paces away, relief etched on her face that her son was learning some skill besides running or hiding from whites. They worked until the sun dipped low and the stable was much improved, though far from finished. The smell of fresh pine planks mingled with old hay. Everyone retreated to the common hall, weary. Jaime felt the old ache flaring in his side but forced himself to walk upright. Aemon, as if noticing, asked quietly if Jaime's wound hurt. Jaime admitted it did, but said it would pass with time. The boy's concern was touching in a way Jaime was unaccustomed to. Once he'd have brushed aside sympathy. Now he accepted it with a nod. That evening, Jaime collapsed onto his bunk in the barracks, letting exhaustion cradle him. He missed the relative privacy of the tower chamber he had early on, but that was reserved for senior officers now, and anyway, the free folk needed the space more. He dozed off quickly, a welcome dreamlessness overtaking him. But some time later, a jostling at his shoulder woke him. He blinked, groaning. A lantern's light pierced his eyes. "Jaime," hissed a voice. Dale, one of the black brothers he had patrolled with in the past, stood there, eyes wide. "There's a raven for you, urgent. The maester says it just arrived, bearing your name from King's Landing." Jaime's heart lurched. Tyrion's reply? Adrenaline banished his fatigue. He threw off the blankets, ignoring the protest from his ribs, and sat up. "Where is it?" he asked hoarsely. "In the rookery. The maester's boy is waiting." Jaime was already pulling on his cloak. He limped from the barracks into the cold night, stars overhead. A mixture of anticipation and dread churned in his gut. If Tyrion had responded so soon, perhaps there was urgent news from the south. He ascended the tower steps 2 at a time, pain lancing his side. At the top, Cedric waited, bleary-eyed, holding out a thin parchment. The lad bowed awkwardly. Jaime snatched the letter, stepping closer to a lantern for light. Yes, it was Tyrion's unmistakable scrawl. "Jaime, I am relieved to learn you still live. I regret that so many have not been as fortunate. The news of even a single White Walker returning is alarming, to say the least, but you say it's dealt with, so the realm breathes easier. I have tried to convey the seriousness to her grace. She is complicated at present, busy grappling with lords who question her rule. You might be interested to know that the crown's funds are running lower than one would hope, and she's had to bargain with the Iron Bank anew. The shape of the future is uncertain. Still, I might persuade her to send some support to the Watch, perhaps more dragonglass if any is found. I am unsure how much good can be done from the south. Even so, I hold out hope that we can unify the realm enough to prevent any future undead catastrophes. Keep me informed, brother. And if you find yourself wanting to see the capital again, I will do what I can to ensure safe passage, though I doubt you have any appetite for the south at this point. There is more I could say, but let this suffice for now. You have my respect, Jaime. The realm owes you a debt it doesn't fully grasp. Tyrion." Jaime closed his eyes, relief and sadness swirling together. Tyrion was alive, well, in a position of influence yet again. Of course, Tyrion was never comfortable without power. The mention of Daenerys Targaryen grappling with rebellious lords did not surprise Jaime. The realm had been torn apart by wars, and the Targaryen hold on the throne must still be tenuous. But at least the queen seemed open to hearing about the Watch's struggles if Tyrion could steer her attention north. Jaime exhaled slowly, folding the letter. It felt like a small link to a world he had left behind, but not wholly severed. He thanked Cedric, who yawned, and returned to the Ravens. Jaime descended the tower, carefully, each step sending a twinge through him. Once he might have bristled at the idea that Tyrion believed the realm owed Jaime Lannister anything. Now he simply felt weary. Let them spin their songs or weave their stories. He wanted no grand recognition. The men who died deserved more laurels than he did. But he was oddly grateful for Tyrion's friendship. Maybe someday, if the Watch's burdens ever eased, they could see each other again. For now, he had his vow, and Tyrion had the Queen's court. 2 different worlds. By the time he returned to the barracks, the adrenaline had faded, replaced by bone-deep exhaustion. He slipped under the blankets, tucking Tyrion's note inside his cloak for safekeeping. Sleep came quickly, carrying him into a dreamless dark. In the weeks that followed, the last of the deep winter storms buffeted the wall. Snowdrifts piled high against the eastern ramparts, forcing men to shovel daily just to keep the passage clear. Wagons sometimes took days to travel the short distance from Mole's Town. Still, the presence of the northern soldiers and the watchful Black brothers kept some semblance of order. Gald oversaw the distribution of supplies, rotating men to keep them from losing morale. Jaime's wound continued to heal slowly, though it still flared whenever he strained. The old tingle in his stump was a persistent reminder of the man he had been, the man who had once soared with pride and skill. One gray, blustery afternoon, a herald from Winterfell arrived bearing Lady Sansa's personal sigil, a gray direwolf on white cloth. Jaime and Gald met him in the courtyard, shielded from the cutting wind. The herald, a young man with a neatly trimmed beard, handed Gald a sealed letter, then bowed. Gald broke the wax, scanned the contents, and his eyes widened slightly. He passed it to Jaime. "Read," he said. Jaime did, lips moving silently over the words. "Lord Commander Gald and brothers of the Night's Watch, with winter's grip beginning to ease, we plan to hold a great gathering in Winterfell to discuss the future of the North and the realm. Houses loyal to Stark and Targaryen alike have been invited, as well as representatives of other regions. I humbly request that the Night's Watch send an envoy to speak on matters of defense and the role of the Watch in the new order. The White Walker threat has not been forgotten, nor have your sacrifices. We wish to ensure the Watch has both the resources and the recognition it needs." You may send whomever you deem fit, though I suggest a man well versed in the recent events with the undead. We shall hold the gathering 1 moon's turn from now. Travel safely and may the old gods guide you. Sansa Stark, Lady of Winterfell. Jaime handed it back, exchanging a look with Gale. She wants an envoy. Will you go yourself, or send someone else? Gale pressed his lips together. Traveling to Winterfell might be difficult with all the duties here, but a chance to speak at a gathering of northern lords is too valuable to ignore. We need them to maintain support for the Watch. He hesitated, gaze flicking to Jaime. Truth be told, you be the best envoy. You face the Walker, you're well-spoken enough, and you have a name that resonates. The men would trust you to speak for us. Jaime's stomach clenched. He had expected some kind of official representation eventually, but the idea of journeying to Winterfell to stand before lords and ladies made him uneasy. He pictured a hall full of wary stares, some of them remembering him as the Kingslayer, some of them seeing a crippled watchman. What about you? He countered. You're the acting Lord Commander. Gale shook his head. My place is here, at least for now. The men need stable leadership. I don't want them thinking I've abandoned them before we hold a formal election. You, on the other hand, can handle the ride, I think. Your wound should be strong enough in a few weeks. You know how to talk to highborn folk, gods know I don't. And Lady Stark asked specifically for someone who dealt with the undead. That's you. Jaime looked away, grappling with reluctance and duty. He no longer craved the courts of the powerful, but he understood the necessity. The Watch needed allies. If that's your command, I'll do it, he said at length. I'll speak on our behalf. It's not my command, Gale said gently. It's my request. I can't force you, but I believe it's for the best. Very well, Jaime agreed, blowing out a slow breath. I'll go. And so, the decision was made. Over the next weeks, the men prepared an escort for Jaime, a small party of black brothers who would ride with him to Winterfell. The journey would be arduous in the late winter roads, but passable. Gale insisted on sending at least 4 men for safety, plus a spare horse or 2 for supplies. Haleth and Aemon asked if they might come, though Jaime gently advised them to remain, as the roads might be too dangerous for a boy. Haleth agreed, though with visible disappointment. For her, Winterfell was a symbol of hope. In truth, Jaime wished she and her son could find a life there, but traveling with an official envoy would be complicated. Perhaps after the thaw, they might move south more safely. A crisp dawn found Jaime in the courtyard, saddling a sturdy bay mare. His side still twinged, but the maester had removed the bandages, leaving him with only a layer of padding beneath his tunic. He wore boiled leather and a thick black cloak. A dragonglass dagger hung at his belt, alongside a short sword that he wielded left-handed. 4 crows formed his retinue: Dale, Rowan, Lyle, and a younger recruit named Darren who had a knack for bows. They all carried dragonglass in some fashion. If white still lurked in stray corners, they would not be caught unprepared. Gale clasped Jaime's forearm in farewell. Speak well. Remind the lords how important the Watch is, how we stand guard against threats they'd rather ignore. I will, Jaime said. He turned to the open gate where the snow glistened. The watchers on the wall gave a cry of farewell. A small crowd had gathered to see them off, including some free folk and black brothers. Haleth and Aemon waved from a distance. Jaime inclined his head in response. Then he mounted the mare, ignoring the pull in his ribs, and spurred her forward. They set out down the Old King's Road that led eventually to Winterfell. Travel proved challenging, though the storms had lessened. Ice still coated many stretches of the road. Dale and Rowan took turns guiding the group, scanning the trees for any sign of trouble. They encountered a few small bands of travelers, a merchant's wagon, a handful of hardy peasants, a group of House Serwyn soldiers. News spread that Lady Stark's gathering at Winterfell was drawing many from across the north. Some traveled with caution, remembering the wars that had ravaged these lands. But the White Walker scare had evidently spurred a renewed sense of unity, or at least curiosity. People wanted to hear from the Watch to see how close the realm had come to a second catastrophe. Jaime found the motion of riding for long hours exhausting on his wounded side. Each jolt of the horse pulled at the half-healed flesh. By the time they made camp each night, he was drenched in sweat, gulping at the cold air to steady the throbbing ache. Nevertheless, he forced himself onward. He tried to avoid leaning on the other's sympathy. This was his duty. He refused to appear weak when they eventually reached Winterfell. They traveled for nearly a fortnight, forging south over frosted moors and narrow passes. The nights were frigid. More than once, they heard wolves howling in the distance. Dale jokingly said the wolves were disappointed not to find more whites to chew on. Rowan snorted that the wolves had better manners than any undead. Jaime listened to their banter, occasionally contributing a remark, though he often lapsed into thought. Memories of King's Landing intruded of how different the roads had been in the south, lined with farmland and bustling towns. Here, the north was sparse, stoic, haunted by the aftertaste of war. On a pale dawn, the towers of Winterfell finally came into view. Smoke rose from its chimneys, a comforting sign of warmth within the gray walls. Jaime took a moment to remember the last time he'd set foot here ages ago, before the realm was ripped apart by politics and the War of the Five Kings. He had been younger then, full of arrogance, never imagining how deeply fate would twist. Now he returned as a battered knight of the Night's Watch, missing a hand, bearing scars from a White Walker. The wheel of time spun in circles indeed. They rode up to the main gate, where guards in stark livery examined them. Upon seeing the black cloaks, one guard nodded politely. "Lady Stark is expecting an envoy from the Watch," he said. "Enter. You'll be shown to a courtyard where you can stable your horses." Jaime dismounted with a grimace, handing the reins to Dale. They stepped within Winterfell's walls, the courtyard bustling with activity. Wagons, knights, lords, and ladies milled about. Banners of various northern houses fluttered, Manderley, Glover, Serwyn, and more. It reminded Jaime of the old tournaments, minus the pageantry of southern finery. The north was plainer, more subdued, but no less proud. A steward approached. "Are you the envoy from Castle Black?" "I am," Jaime said. "Jaime of the Night's Watch." The steward gestured for them to follow. "My lady said to bring you to her solar as soon as you arrived, if you're willing. She's in the Great Keep. Your men can stable their horses. We'll have quarters prepared for them." Jaime nodded at his companions. "Get yourselves settled. I'll see what Lady Stark requires." The four Black brothers saluted him in a loose, informal way. Dale gave him a quick pat on the shoulder, whispering "luck" under his breath. Jaime followed the steward through Winterfell's courtyards, noticing the repairs from the war, some new sections of wall, fresh timber, scorched stones replaced. Yet the fortress retained a timeless feel, with thick gray towers and the faint scent of pine from the godwood. The steward led him up a broad stair into the Great Keep, then through a corridor lined with candles. Guards stood at intervals, eyeing Jaime with mild curiosity. Finally, they reached a door flanked by two more guards. The steward knocked, then pushed it open, beckoning Jaime inside. He stepped into a modest solar lit by windows that overlooked Winterfell's courtyard. A large table bore maps of the north, small markers placed upon them. Standing behind the table was Sansa Stark, wearing a fur-trimmed gown of dark gray and a mantle embroidered with the Stark sigil. Her hair was swept up in a simple arrangement, accentuating the calm, measured grace she exuded. She turned at Jaime's entrance. A spark of recognition crossed her features. She had met him briefly at Castle Black after the White Walker was slain. "Sir Jaime," she said, then caught herself. "Pardon me, brother Jaime." There was a hint of a smile, tempered by courtesy. "Welcome to Winterfell." He inclined his head. "My lady, thank you for the invitation." She gestured for the steward to leave them, and the guards quietly closed the door. Sansa studied Jaime for a moment, as though measuring how he'd changed since their last brief encounter. "You look well, if tired. The roads must have been harsh." "They were," Jaime said, forcing a polite tone. "But we made it. I come on behalf of the Night's Watch to discuss the future, as you requested." Sansa nodded. "I appreciate you traveling so far. Many lords have arrived for the same reason. Some fear more walkers lurk in the north. Others question if the Watch is necessary now that the threat seems gone. I wanted your presence to dispel their doubts. I remember how close we came to disaster, even if many prefer not to dwell on it." Jaime shifted his stance. "The Watch stands ready, my lady, but we are few and we need the realm's continued support. We face not only the undead but also the challenge of feeding and sheltering the free folk who have joined us." "Exactly," Sansa said, motioning for him to sit at a bench near the table. She moved to an opposite seat. "I intend to rally the northern lords behind a plan to expand the gift, allowing free folk to settle as they did after the Long Night's End some years back. We'll need the Watch's input on how to keep the peace. Beyond that, we might address how to replenish your ranks. Times are changing." Jaime listened, feeling a strange mix of respect for her foresight. Once, he might have dismissed Sansa Stark as a naive girl. Clearly, she was anything but. She spoke with quiet authority, her eyes sharp with intelligence. "I'll share whatever insights I have," he assured her. "We're open to new recruits, though we don't wish to become an army force to fight in southern quarrels. Our vow remains: we guard the realms of men from threats beyond the wall." She allowed a small, wry smile. "You'd think men to the south would appreciate that vow more, but short memories have always plagued Westeros. At least the north remembers. For now, let me show you to your quarters. You'll have some hours to rest before the feast tonight." Then tomorrow we'll hold the first of many councils to chart the North's course. A feast. Jaime braced himself for the idea of a large, formal gathering. He'd face the stares of lords who once brandished swords at the name of Lannister. But so be it. As you say, he said. Sansa rose and Jaime followed her out. She summoned a maid to guide him to a comfortable chamber in the keep, a gesture of respect rarely offered to a brother of the watch. The corridors hummed with activity, servants hurrying to and fro. Here and there, Jaime caught glimpses of banners from across the north. The sense of a grand assembly weighed on him, yet also sparked a faint curiosity. What would the realm do with no immediate war on the horizon but plenty of old wounds to mend? His assigned chamber was small but well-appointed, with a bed that looked positively luxurious compared to the cots in Castle Black. A flickering hearth warmed the air. Jaime set down his travel pack, rolling his stiff shoulder. He felt a wave of relief at the prospect of a few hours' rest. Maids offered to bring him hot water if he desired a bath. He accepted, thinking it might ease the ache in his side. Once the bath was drawn, he lowered himself into the steaming water, suppressing a groan of mingled pain and pleasure. The heat seeped into muscles knotted by riding and cold. He leaned his head back against the tub's rim, letting the tension drain away. At times like this, he almost forgot his vow. The comfort of a keep was dangerously alluring. But he had no illusions he would return to the wall when this was done. That was his life now. Let the lords have their featherbeds. His mind drifted as the water loosened the knots in his body. He recalled that once he'd visited Winterfell in King Robert's entourage so long ago. He had been golden-haired, supremely confident, flirting with the ladies, mocking the northern customs behind their backs. How far he had fallen or risen depending on one's perspective. He was no longer that man. He took a breath, submerging briefly, letting the water close over his ears, shutting out the world. The scalding heat pressed on his wounded side, dulling the ache. Then he emerged, water trickling down his scarred torso. He dried himself slowly, changed into a clean black tunic, and lay on the bed to rest his eyes. Before he realized it, he fell into a deep doze. He awoke to a knock at the door. The chamber was bathed in the golden glow of late afternoon sunlight. Jaime sat up, wincing as the movement pulled at his scar. "Enter," he called. A young steward stepped in, bowing. "The feast will begin soon in the Great Hall, Brother Jaime. Lady Stark asked that you join the High Table if you wish. She'd like you to speak about the White Walker's defeat at some point." Jaime suppressed a surge of anxiety. He'd never been shy about public speaking. Once he would have relished the attention. But that was before the White Walker, before the pangs of self-doubt. "I'll attend," he said softly. "Thank you." The steward left. Jaime stood, smoothing his black tunic, checking that his sword belt was in order. He considered wearing a finer cloak but realized all he had was the standard thick black cloak of the watch. That was probably for the best. He was not here to impress anyone with fashion. With a final glance in a polished brass mirror where he saw a lined face and a single determined gray eye staring back, he left the chamber. The great hall of Winterfell was ablaze with torchlight and crowded with lords, ladies, knights, and their retinues. Long tables groaned under platters of roasted meats, vegetables, and bread. Servants weaved among the throng, refilling cups with ale or wine. The northern chill crept in through cracks, but the press of bodies and the roaring fires offset it. Jaime paused at the entrance, taking stock. He spotted House Manderly's sigil on one corner, House Glover on another, smaller houses scattered about. A group of men wearing Targaryen colors, black and red, stood near the dais, apparently southern visitors. He also noticed a few Vale lords recognized by the falcon badge of House Arryn. The entire north and beyond was represented here. Then he saw Sansa at the high table, flanked by advisors. Her gaze swept the hall and alighted on him. She gave a small wave, beckoning him forward. Feeling the weight of many eyes, Jaime threaded through the crowd. Whispers followed him. "Lannister. A brother of the Watch? He killed a White Walker, they say." He kept his chin up, ignoring the prickle in his side. His missing hand drew some stares, but he was used to that. Reaching the dais, he inclined his head to Lady Stark. She motioned for him to sit at her left. To her right was a tall, bearded lord wearing Manderly insignia, presumably Wyman Manderly's kin. A hush began to fall as the attention shifted to the dais. Sansa stood gracefully, resting her hands on the edge of the table. "Welcome, friends," she said in a clear voice. "Winterfell is honored to host so many who have come to speak of our shared future. We remember the wars, the White Walkers, the cost in blood. Let us break bread and find a way forward together." Polite applause followed. Servants rushed to fill bowls and carve meat. The tension eased into murmured conversation. Jaime found himself given a plate of venison stew and fresh bread. It smelled divine. He realized how hungry he was after so many days of travel rations. Sansa resumed her seat, turning to speak with the Manderley man. Jaime listened politely. He recognized some talk of shipping lanes, trade routes through White Harbor, the readiness for a potential threat if more undead surfaced. Lady Sansa skillfully guided the conversation, deferring to each house's concerns but maintaining an air of calm authority. She truly had grown into her role. After a while, as the meal progressed and cups were refilled, Lady Stark gently tapped Jaime's shoulder. Lord Marlon Manderley was asking about the events at Castle Black, she said. Would you care to explain to him and to all how dire it was? We have many here who did not see the threat firsthand. Jaime swallowed, feeling that unwelcome nod of anxiety. But he nodded. If you wish, my lady. She motioned for the assembled throng to quiet slightly. Jaime rose, leaning on the table. Across the hall, dozens of faces turned toward him, suspicious, curious, some half-drunken. He drew a breath, ignoring the protest in his ribs. I am Jaime Lannister, he began, letting his voice resonate. But I speak as a brother of the Night's Watch. We faced a White Walker beyond the wall, one that rose from the old nightmares you believed ended with the last war. It reanimated corpses, nearly overran Castle Black. Many of our brothers fell. We burned countless whites. Only dragonglass or Valyrian steel could wound it. When we finally brought it down, it shattered into ice and wind. The cost was high, too high. He paused, meeting the gazes of the lords and ladies. I tell you this to remind you that the others were not gone. One survived, at least, and nearly gave us a new long night. We overcame it by unity, black brothers and free folk side by side. And by luck. Do not forget how close the realm came to disaster. A hush gripped the hall. Some men shifted uncomfortably in their seats. A Glover bannerman muttered to his neighbor. Jaime raised his chin, continuing. We ask you not to cast aside the watch when the next threat seems distant. The day may come again. If you want your children safe, remember that the wall stands or falls with your support. His voice echoed, then faded. A long silence followed. Lady Sansa stood, placing a hand on his arm in a show of accord. Well spoken, she said, addressing the crowd. This is precisely why we gather. The threat is real even if it sleeps. We must not be divided as we once were. Let us honor the Watch's vow and ensure they remain a bulwark for us all. A smattering of applause broke out. Not thunderous, but respectful. Lord Marlon Manderley gave Jaime an appreciative nod, though some lords merely raised eyebrows or whispered among themselves. Jaime sensed that some doubted or felt uneasy about the old horrors. That was their choice. He had done his part to open their eyes. He resumed his seat, breath unsteady. Sansa quietly thanked him, then allowed the feast's conversation to resume, drifting to other matters. Trade, alliances, forging new roads. Ale and wine flowed. The tension ebbed as men turned to their cups, though Jaime noticed certain glances directed at him now and then. Let them whisper, he thought. The Watch needed them to understand, not necessarily to ADM. Ire him. As the evening wore on, the hall grew louder. Sansa left her seat to speak with other lords. Jaime toyed with his cup of watered wine, mindful of how strong drink might inflame his healing wound. His side throbbed from standing so long. He rubbed it absently, scanning the crowd. He saw a figure approach from the corner of his eye, a tall woman in a cloak of deep green, face partially in shadow. She seemed familiar. When she drew close, the firelight revealed her features, Brienne of Tarth. Jaime's pulse jolted. He hadn't seen her in so long. She wore a plain surcoat over light armor, a longsword belted at her waist. Her blonde hair was tied back. A scar slashed across her cheek, a mark of old battles. She was looking right at him with a mixture of surprise and something else he couldn't name. Sir Jaime, brother Jaime, Brienne said, voice low and uncertain. He rose slowly, ignoring the twinge. Brienne. That was all he managed. Emotions warred in him. Old guilt, respect, memories of their journey together, the trust forged then battered by war. She hesitated. I heard rumors you were at the wall. That you killed a White Walker. She glanced around, conscious of the crowded hall. May I sit? He gestured for her to do so. They sat side by side at the dais' edge, though no one was paying them much mind in the swirl of conversation. Jaime noticed the lines of fatigue around her eyes. What brings you to Winterfell? He asked. I serve Lady Sansa, Brienne said. I've been her sworn sword for some time, though the realm's changes have led me to other tasks, resolving border disputes, ensuring her messages reach distant houses. She asked me to attend this council in case some threat emerges. I only arrived yesterday. She paused, letting her gaze flick over him. You look different. He managed a brittle laugh. I'm older, missing one hand, and have a wound from an ice demon. Yes, I'd say I'm different. She flinched slightly. I heard about the White Walker, and that you joined the Night's Watch of your own will. Why? He searched her face. Once he would have teased her for such a direct question. Now he only exhaled. I had no place else to go, he said plainly. I needed something that wasn't tied to the bloodshed of my family, some vow that meant something. I found it at the wall, for better or worse. Brienne nodded slowly. I see. A flicker of empathy crossed her face. I'm glad you found purpose, Jaime. The wars changed many things. He watched her expression. She was so different from the naive knight he had once mocked, yet also the same in her unwavering sense of honor. And you? Serving Sansa suits you, he said. You were always determined to protect the Stark girls. Brienne lowered her gaze. She's become a just ruler, if cautious. I still honor the vow I made to her mother. And to myself. We live in uncertain times, still. Jaime nodded. Have you heard anything of my sister? He felt a pang asking about Cersei. Part of him no longer wished to know, yet some twisted curiosity lingered. Brienne pursed her lips. I've heard no official word. Some say she vanished from King's Landing after Daenerys took the throne, possibly killed in the chaos. Others claim she escaped across the sea. None know for sure. Her tone was gentle, as if wary of how it might wound him. I'm sorry. He swallowed the ache in his throat. I see. Perhaps it's best I don't know. He realized he felt only a numb acceptance, not the scorching heartbreak of old. That chapter was done. They sat in silence for a moment, the noise of the feast swirling around them. Eventually, Brienne said, I'm sorry about how things ended between us last time. We parted in conflict. She was referring to that ill-fated moment in the war's final throes when each of them had chosen different paths. She to serve the Starks, he to confront Cersei, convinced he could break free of her or die trying. Jaime glanced down at his stump. We all made choices in the chaos. I don't hold you at fault. He forced a small smirk. You always did have a better moral compass than me. She shook her head. Stop. That's old talk. I'm just relieved to see you alive, changed. I never wanted you to suffer for your attempts at redemption. He felt a warmth in her words, an echo of the trust they once shared. I made my bed, he said softly, but I'm grateful we could speak again. He set a hand briefly on her arm, ignoring the curious looks from a few onlookers. Thank you, Brienne, for caring about Sansa, and about me once. She blinked, nodding. If you need anything here, let me know. I serve Lady Stark, but I owe you respect as well. She hesitated. Are you staying long? Only as long as these councils last. Then I'll return to the wall. Brienne exhaled. Then let us speak more while we can. Perhaps we can help each other keep these lords focused on what matters. There's still so much division. The realm's at peace, but old grudges run deep. He agreed, glancing at the crowd of assembled northern lords. She stood, offering a small bow. I'll see you again soon, Jaime. He inclined his head. She stepped away, disappearing into the swirl of cloaks and banners. Jaime let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. Seeing her again brought a flutter of old memories. Of honor, shame, rescue, vulnerability. He was glad she lived and served a worthy cause. Part of him felt unspoken feelings stir, but he pressed them down. Time had changed them both. The feast wore on. Jaime conversed with a few northern lords, repeating details of the White Walker's attack. Some listened intently, promising support for the watch. Others seemed uninterested in focusing on the undead threat, more concerned with forging trade routes or alliances. By the time the hall began to empty, with guests drifting off to their chambers, Jaime's throat was sore from talking, and his side throbbed fiercely. He made his way out, aiming for the quiet of his assigned chamber. The corridors were dimly lit, torch brackets casting flickering shadows. At a corner, he nearly collided with a stocky man who smelled of ale. Pardon, Jaime said, stepping aside. The man peered at Jaime's face and scowled. "You're the Lannister," he spat. Jaime blinked. The man wore no house sigil, but he had the bearing of a lesser northern knight, possibly a retainer. "The Kingslayer," the man growled. "My cousin died at the Red Wedding. Another died in the fight near Riverrun. Both times your family's gold paid for carnage." Jaime's heart sank. He'd hoped not to face such open hostility here, but it was inevitable. "I'm sorry for your losses," he said quietly. The man let out a rough laugh. "Sorry doesn't bring them back. Are you sorry that you butchered the king you were sworn to protect? That you bedded your sister? We all know the tales." Jaime's jaw tightened. The old anger flared, but he forced it down. "Believe what you like," he said. "I'm a brother of the Watch now. I have no claim to Lannister gold or power." The man sneered. "Men like you always claim redemption when convenient. Do you think a vow in black washes away the blood? The White Walker you killed, big deal. You've still got the stench of an oathbreaker." He took a step closer, breath reeking of wine. Jaime tensed, left hand drifting toward his sword hilt. But then the man scoffed and staggered off, muttering curses. Jaime stood there a moment, shoulders stiff, trying to calm the roiling in his gut. He had encountered hostility before, but it never stopped stinging. Some wounds never healed. He thought of how close he'd come to drawing steel on that drunken night. Another moment, and a fight would have erupted in Sansa's halls, overshadowing the entire summit. That was the last thing the Watch needed. He forced himself to turn away, continuing to his chamber with a slow, measured stride. Once inside, he sank onto the bed, letting out a shuddering sigh. He pressed a hand to his side. A small patch of dampness marked where the old wound might have reopened slightly in the strain of the evening. He peeled back his tunic, grimacing to see a trickle of blood. He would need the maester's kit again, or at least a new bandage. But not now. Weariness consumed him. He lay back, eyes drifting shut, the flicker of candlelight playing across his eyelids. The echoes of the drunken knight's accusations filled his head: oathbreaker, kingslayer, incest. He remembered Brienne's concern, Sansa's trust, Tyrion's letter. The swirl of conflicting judgments threatened to suffocate him. He clung to the vow that had carried him this far: "I am the shield that guards the realms of men." That vow might not erase the blood on his hands, but perhaps it allowed him a measure of atonement. The night pressed in, and gradually he drifted into fitful sleep, haunted by half-formed dreams of swords and ice, of the golden lion he once was, and the black cloak he wore now. If morning brought more counsels, more judgments, so be it. He would face them. No matter how many questioned or despised him, he would stand by the vow. It was all he had left, and in its austere demand, he found a grim kind of peace.